going to have what it takes to get out of this. It does look like game one is probably going to be going over David Nunez.
Yeah, there's so we don't talk about Bruno in hand now, so we can get rid of that Sisu, but that will be just kind of delaying things a little bit. That is the out for this turn, however. There we go. Going to force a discard here. This will. Well, no. See, we still have 2 lore on board. Yeah, this is a tough spot.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think just the huge, yeah, and so Betty says, yeah, I wanted to go out swinging. You know, I still wanted to be able to take care of one of these. I still had an answer to this big character that you had, but it does look like game one is going to go to David Nunez, and I think that was prototypically what happens where one of the players kind of has their deck do what it's supposed to do, and the other player struggled for a turn or two to do the same.
Yeah, and I will say this game was not. This is a close game. There was this key moment in the mid game where Betty was able to get her opponent David down to 2 cards. It was the 2 Flavishams, which allowed David to hang around in the game. But if one of those Flavishams wasn't there, or if he didn't have the Flavisham, Betty with a Hypnotize, another discard card like Sudden Chill, could have forced David into top deck mode a lot earlier than he would have wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. If she got out just a little bit faster, I think that game could have looked drastically different. And hopefully for her, that's what's going to happen in game 2. Let's go ahead and head on down to game 2. It sounds like the players are ready. Let's see if she can even it up here, or if David Nunez is going to start off his day with a 2-0 right where you want to be in one of these events.
Right. So we talked about the plan for Betty here. Betty wants to be aggressive early, gather lore. That's really how you beat these Ruby Sapphire decks. These Ruby Sapphire decks, what they're doing is they're giving up early board oftentimes in the interest of advancing their resources, advancing their inkwell to get to their big endgame cards, their powerful endgame cards, as fast as possible. And so Betty wants to be aggressive, get that early lore, perhaps get a Diablo or a Prince John online in the mid game. David, on the other hand, needs to be thinking about mulliganing or altering his hand aggressively for that Flavisham, for some card draw. Wants to get to 6 ink as fast as possible, so cards like Madame Medusa are available. This is not, looking at his hand here, this is not a great opening hand. A ton of end game here. We do have the Fishbone Quill and how far I'll go, but we have no turn 2 play with this hand. We have no turn 1 Popsicle. So an aggressive alter here is definitely in the cards.
Yeah, I was going to say, how many do you think he's going to be keeping off this one?
Not many.
Maybe the Quill? I was going to say, I think just the Quill. Yep. Get back 6. Yeah.
Yep. Really wants that turn 2 ramp. Really wants that Popsicle.
Oh, boy. That was okay, well.
We do have the visions. Okay.
He does have a vision, so that is something he at least do on 2, but the problem is he's got a couple of uninkables in his hand, too. I saw at least one Sisu there as well, so maybe a little bit of help here for Betty as well, that if David comes out a little bit slower this game, maybe she can get one of her engines online and steal a game here.
Yeah, this is going to be a really rough opening for David. Hopefully he can top deck when he needs in the first few turns, or that Vision's on turn 2. But if you're playing Visions on turn 2, you're not playing Tipo, you're not playing one jump ahead, and so you're not advancing your resources like you want to.
Yeah, generally, if you're playing Visions on turn 2, you don't have those cards you mentioned, and you might even be looking for a Fishbone Quill. And so if I was Betty and someone altered 6 cards, I would think that's something that's possibly happening, that the hand was just practically unplayable, and then now the alter is not good as well. But look, Betty's going to get a fresh look at this whole thing. She goes ahead and inks a Brawl into a Diablo to get a look at David Nunez's hand. Thank you, Becky. That helps us out a lot. We can see everything there.
Yeah, and now he's, that terrible, terrible draw here. Really wanted to draw into a Popsicle. Didn't get it. Look at all those uninkables. This is rough. 3 Sisus in the opening hand, if I'm seeing correctly, plus a Lucky Dime. It's just rough. Now, Betty, I was going to say, Betty, I will mention, probably not on her ideal opening either. On the play, wants to be aggressive, so a Cursed Merfolk probably would have been the ideal first turn card for her. This does open up the Diablo shift line here, and did get a peek at the hand, but definitely wants higher lore characters on the board early, so probably not on her ideal draw either.
Yeah, David, look, 3 of a kind in this city, usually a good thing. Not great here for David early with these uninkables in his hand, but that Cursed Merfolk is going to make an appearance, like you said, here on turn 2, and get a little bit of lore as well from that Diablo. Let's see, David, did he draw anything to do on turn 2? It doesn't look like, yeah. No. I didn't think he was going to be using Visions, because you just have to make sure you use all of your ink here. I think it's the biggest thing is when you have 3 uninkables in your opening hand like this, you want to make sure that you're going to be inking all the way up.
Yeah.
And so I definitely don't blame him for inking the Visions here on turn 2.
No, I think that's exactly the calculation. I think you're exactly right. I think that's exactly right. Yeah, you definitely have an ink problem here. Choosing to save the Maui instead, knowing that once you get to turn 5, that'll be useful for getting rid of cards. Here we're discarding the Lucky Dime. It never feels bad to discard the Lucky Dime early day. That's an easy choice because you can get it back later with Tamatoa. And so this kind of a free discard there for David. But look at those uninkables.
Yeah, it's going to be something that could maybe be a problem in his hand here, but
I will say, at least we have the Fishbone Quill, so we can make use of those uninkable Sisus. We're going to do that right away. Send one of them to the Inkwell. There it goes.
absolutely, and this is going to help out his hand quite a bit here. Not only is it ramping up, getting up to those Mauis and Sisus a little bit faster, but this does make those uninkables a little more palatable. Back over to Betty here. She's got the Cursed Merfolk. She's got the Diablo still questing up. She's already at 4.
Yeah, but not the ideal hand. Wants to be dropping Flynn Riders on turn 2, other High Lord characters. She does have the Brawl there to answer the Flavisham, but David without the Flavisham this game. Prince John coming down, though. That'll be nice. That'll get her cards whenever she forces the discard to give her some advantage moving into the mid and the late game. But now up to 7 lore already.
Yep, 3 more this turn, up to 7. Back over to David. Let's see if he makes his first really proactive play this game. Popsicle off the top. Not a bad one.
Terrible.
Yeah.
I will say, thank goodness for David, though. He has to be breathing a sigh of relief that he had that Fishbone Quill. Think of what situation he would be right now if he did not have the Fishbone Quill in his hand and those Sisus are sitting there and he'd be forced to draw or to ink most of the inkables that he's drawing here in the early game. So
yeah, I think he would have been forced to do the visions on turn 2.
Yes.
Instead of inking it, he would have been forced to play it to find something deeper in the deck. You see, he goes ahead and visions here, finds multiple big drops, finds a Tamatoa, finds a Maleficent, but it does look like he's taking a Popsicle instead. Just something else that he can do with his ink this turn.
Yep, sending it to the Inkwell, looks like. Or no, putting it there, take it to the hand.
Nah, I think he's going to say, let's just give him a second. He might be playing that. Yeah, it's because he's going to play that, get all the information here before he inks for his turn and uses the Fishbone Quill. So, Lucky Dime off the top, another uninkable.
Not so lucky there. Something that he definitely didn't want to draw here.
Absolutely. That one's going to get sent to the Inkwell. Thanks you, Fishbone Quill. It looks like Maui's going to go ahead and make it into the ink as well and pass back over to Becky.
Yeah,
Betty.
Happy to send the Lucky Dime to the Inkwell there. Again, in this deck, you don't need 2 Lucky Dimes. They're always fun when you get 2 of them on board. But that one sitting in the discard pile will be available with a Tamatoa later, so not a hard option there.
Back over to Betty here. See, she got Lyle Tiberius Rook off the top as well here, so another thing that she can do here this turn. Let's see, I don't get to see all of her hand here, but she's quite ahead on board with the lore, but we're starting to get into the danger zone when you're playing against these red-blue decks. You're starting to worry about these Sisus that we saw multiple times last game. You're starting to worry about cards like Be Prepared.
And Sisu would be the perfect answer here. I need to take a look at the ink because I think we are pretty close, especially with that Quill on board. Yes, it'll definitely be available here. David can wipe Betty's board with that Sisu, and Betty be forced to rebuild after that. We will see that happen right here.
Yeah, and you can see Betty, with that on her mind, didn't deploy any more characters here. She's like, I don't want to get hit by Sisu any harder than I absolutely have to. She's at 7 lore. David's at 0, but now he's at least stemmed the tide of the early aggression from Betty.
I may have missed the lore gain last turn. I think she quested for 4, being at 7 previous turn. I think we might be off, but I'm not positive.
Yeah, maybe the players haven't updated it on the...
That's possibly true.
Yeah.
And again, I mentioned again with Betty's deck, we know she has a Pirate's Life available. We know we have Super Goof, so that's instant lore. So getting to 16 lore, 15, 16 lore is definitely something that she's thinking about doing. Here we have Lyle Tiberius Rook coming into play. Lyle is a card that gives an opposing character reckless when it's played, meaning that character cannot quest and must challenge if possible. So 3 lore would have been available to David there, but instead Cece's going to have to sit there because there's no challenge available. And I don't know, sing a song maybe if...
Well, it looks like there's going to be a second Sisu here backed up, going to take care of that Lyle Tiberius, and that's going to be a pass from David because he can't do anything else. But look, you were talking about how unlucky it was earlier. I think the last card in his hand is a Lucky Dime. It's going to start getting this game closer in the lore count very quickly. But like you talk about a lot in this spot, you can't always rely on the last card or last 2 cards in your hand in this matchup.
Right. Yeah, I know this is, again, tough spot for Betty. It's just the removal options available in these colors are not great. You do have Maui, which could deal with these Sisus, but these Sisus need to be exerted. You do have, we don't talk about Bruno, but other than that, and there's one there, we'll send one of the Sisus back to David's hand and then force a discard at random.
Yeah, 50-50 shot of getting the Sisu here, the other one being a Lucky Dime, so we'll see which one is going to happen. So what I think we're doing here is we're going to say this is like 1 through 3, this is 4 through 6. And roll a die, and you can just figure out which one. Yep, there we go. And it looks like it is going to be the Sisu that was taken care of. So good for Betty. Got rid of that Sisu. She doesn't have to deal with it in the future as well.
Yeah, one thing I'll note, David, so we have seen 3 Lucky Dimes now. A lot of these Ruby Sapphire decks recently have been running fewer Lucky Dimes, going down to 2 in some instances. One of the reasons, actually I think minimum is usually 2. One of the reasons I think we're going to see more Lucky Dimes here today is because in the mirror, these Sapphire decks now have Cuscos and they have Hideaways. And when you banish an item to the discard pile, it's available later with the Tamatoa. When you send it into your opponent's inkwell, it's not available anymore. So if you can take away that key piece of this endgame engine, that lucky dime, and send it to your opponent's inkwell, it could be it makes the closing the game difficult. And so for that reason, I think we may see 3 lucky dimes, and I don't know about 4, but certainly more than 2 in some of these Ruby Sapphire builds now.
Yeah, and speaking of that Tamatoa, they came down, got to rebuy one of the popsicles from in play that got sacrificed and bring it back. And then we got to actually play the popsicle as well. So now the lore counts are going to start jumping really high for David every turn here, especially if I think the Lucky Dime went into the Inkwell, though, for him that turn. So it doesn't look like he's going to do the Inkwell Tamatoa combo, but he's going to be able to do some of his stuff. The last card of his hand, which was a Tipo, was hit here by the Hypnotize. So he's going to be top decking, but he's got a lot of stuff that's really good on board right now.
That is true. Definitely pushing a significant amount of lore return.
Yeah, and he's got the Popsicle Tamatoa thing going here. We can sacrifice the Popsicle, quest the Tamatoa. Yeah, you lose a lore. Well, it looks like he's going to go ahead and do this. I think he's going to get back the Lucky Dime that is left over because it was discarded early. So this sets up pretty well. He's going to go ahead and play the Lucky Dime, it looks like. Yep, play the Lucky Dime.
And we have 2 ink left over to use it right away.
Yeah, almost like he worked it out that way. You see one of those Cuscos that you were talking about. I think this is a nice little addition to these decks here as well. Getting answers to stuff that have been problematic in the past, but this Lucky Dime's going to jump the lore. It looks like we went from almost, I think, 0 2 turns ago all the way up to 12 and evening it up here for David.
Yeah, significant lore gain, and Betty's in a bit of a spot here. Really no answer for that Lucky Dime. We'll need another. We don't talk about Bruno, most likely for that Tamatoa. And just don't have the answer. Okay, so we will have a Pirate's Life here. This will delay things a little bit, not only taking 2 lore from David, but adding 2 to her lore total. She will add another 2 from that Cursed Merfolk, so going up to 16 this turn, which is not a bad spot to be, but we'll...
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the Lucky Dime just seals the fate here. If it wasn't for the Lucky Dime last turn and this turn, I think Betty would have got at least 1 more turn this game.
Yeah.
Could have maybe found something like Super Goof or something to maybe find a way to actually steal this game.
Yeah, no, it's, gosh. Again, this deck it wants to be aggressive. The inevitability is with the Ruby Sapphire deck as the game goes long, and so Betty's key to victory is closing out this game early. She had a really good chance against a terrible draw from David Nunez this game. Unfortunately, she also wasn't on the ideal draw. If she'd had the draw she had first game with those 2 Cursed Merfolks, perhaps a Cursed Merfolk into a Flynn Rider, questing for 4 every single turn, a Prince John on turn 3, perhaps, I think Betty would have been in a lot better position. But both players not on the ideal draw, and unfortunately, the inevitability here is with the Sapphire Ruby deck.
Yeah, and we saw the real power of Fishbone Quill there. You know, we talk about a lot on coverage when you see these decks, how important that card is, and it took a practically unplayable hand from David and made it palatable, and then it made it actually good as he got into the late game. And you saw the power of Sisu. And, like, I've seen a lot of people talking about these lists coming in, you know, how many Sisu, how many Be Prepared do we play? You know, I've seen, like, 2 and 2, 3 and 2, 3 and 3, and, like, we see 4 and 4 from a lot of these players going in, and I kind of like that. Like, if I'm playing Quills, I'm playing a bunch of ramp, I want to hit these huge, impactful cards, and that's all I want my deck to do. Now you have Visions as well as just a 2-drop that also inks early in the game to be able to find one of these. I actually, like, this might have been the deck I played today. I absolutely love this deck. I love the way it's built, and it's so consistent. It draws so many cards. It sees its whole deck every game, and you're always finding your big plays, and yeah, sometimes you need a Dragon. Sometimes you need a Sisu. Sometimes you need a Lucky Dime to seal the game, and it's very good at finding them.
And it just has the inevitability. If you can make the game go long and you can hit your ramp early, by the end game, you're definitely going to have it in hand. And it's a great point about the Fishbone Quill, because some of these decks do run pretty high on uninkables. And so having that Fishbone Quill able to make use of those Sisus or those Lucky Dimes, if you're not going to use them in turns 1, 2, 3, and 4, well, on turns 3, 4, 5, 6,
Sure.
is really good.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's hard. Their 1, 2, 3, 4 is actually 4, 5, and 6.
That's right,
With the way the ink works out, it's like, well, they're on turn 4, but they have 7 ink somehow. But that's just what the deck does. Speaking of Lorcana, we've got a little bit more for you this round. This isn't the only match that we've got. We've got a backup match, and we're gonna get that set up. We're gonna have a real quick break. We'll be right back with the second round here.
Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back. I promised you it'd be a short break. We had to get the players set up here for the second part of round one.
Yep.
So we're still in round one, but we've got another feature match for you. Let's go ahead and head on down to that feature match area and get it started.
So we talked earlier about how we were going to see some rogue decks here, decks that are not popular, and we saw one of those. But here, we're going to see a matchup we've seen before. It is two of the big three. It's going to be Ruby Sapphire against Ruby Amethyst, two decks that have been around for quite some time.
Yeah, tale as old as time in Lorcana's history.
Indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen this matchup quite a bit. I'm ready to see what these players have done. Any set 5 cards going into, we've seen quite a bit already in these red-blue decks showing up in round one. So we'll see if any show up on the other side here. We've got Jackie Chang and we've got Joseph Garcia here playing. And we'll see how they want to start off their tournaments here. Like I said earlier, always to start off with a solid 2-0 here, but you want to get at least one of those games. You don't ever want to get swept if you can avoid it.
That's true. We did talk about, as you mentioned, a lot of new cards working into the Sapphire Ruby deck. There's a lot of new tools that it got. Over on the other side, though, on the Amethyst Ruby, there's not a lot that this deck got that make it much better than its previous versions. Some players have started to work on the library, a Gift for Bell, and subbing 2 of those in there. It's a very good card, and playing around with that. But other than that, we may see 1 or 2 other additions, but this deck is going to be very similar to the deck that we've seen in the last meta.
Yeah, we've seen a little bit of Sprinkle of Library. Generally, we see 2. A card that is getting a little bit popular. Sometimes we see like Elsa showing up that we hadn't seen before.
That's Elsa, the 5th Spirit?
Yeah, the 5th Spirit is shown, but that's dependent. I've seen some people really like it and they want to play 2 or 3. I've seen some people that are like, no, my deck's kind of perfect. I don't really need to mess with perfection. This deck has been good for a long time.
Yep.
The bounce package along with the removal and the big plays has just been good for a long time. And one of my favorite things about this deck is that I feel like I'm not really like massively disadvantaged into any matchup when I'm playing this deck. I feel like everything I'm like, hey, it's winnable. Any matchup that I get into, my cards are extremely powerful and work really well together.
That's true. One of this deck's strengths is its consistency. It has that mid-game draw with the rabbit, and it has the control. It's a very consistent deck. It's not necessarily favored into every matchup, but it has a chance into every matchup. And the thing about it is, the core of the deck is just so good. When you look at the key components of it, there's not a lot to move out and replace that. The core of the deck generally just stays the same with some changes on the margins.
Yeah, we're seeing, like how many crabs do you play? How many libraries do you play? Like, we're always playing 4 castles. We're always playing 4 of that location. It's probably the best location in the game. Library, pretty cool, though, especially when you're utilizing something like Turtle Box Followers, Magic Broom. You're trading in with some of your challenges and stuff. That card can really get out of hand really, really fast. I usually generally use it as ink early in the game, so we'll see how this one plays out. But speaking of good early games, we got a turn 1 Popsicle here, right with the Doctor ordered.
Right with the Doctor ordered. I think a Tamato into the Inkwell, followed by a Popsicle, and then we have a turn 1 Chernobog's Hollers here on the other side from Joseph.
Yep, really good starts from both players.
Now, into this matchup, what Joseph wants to do is be aggressive. These Ruby Amethyst decks have changed identity over the course of this game. In the last set, they got a lot more aggressive with Frenemy, and the key to Joseph here is being super aggressive in the early game. In fact, with those Chernobog's Followers, I know early on it was very common to bounce those into Snake or to use those to get a card right away. But here, Joseph may be thinking get as much lore with those followers as possible, because realistically, those followers could get Joseph 3 or 4 lore before Jackie has an answer for them. And so that is the key, is the aggression here. And I think we did see, you mentioned the Elsa. We do have Elsa, the 5th Spirit here in this build, going into the Inkwell here, though.
Yeah, it looks like no play on turn 2 for Joseph Garcia as well. Mirroring Jackie, no plays for either player here on turn 2, but I like that you mentioned this. I think one thing that you find a lot in these matchups is how do you use the Turner Box Followers and the Magic Brooms early? Do you trade them in for cards early? Do you keep them around? How aggressive are you with bouncing them? Because sometimes, hey, I want to be able to play a Fox on 3. I want to be able to play a Snake as quickly as possible into play, so I need these 1-drops to be able to pick up. It looks like we're just going questing here with Joseph, and maybe we're trading it in for a card here. It does look like, look, I've gotten 2 lore out of it. I want to make sure that I hit a good turn 3 here, so it does look like an ink. I believe that's a goat, and into one of the better 3-drops for his deck here in Sisu. Really good this matchup. Always going to have a ton of strength.
it's a great card. You normally see this paired with Frenemy, but here with its high strength, because it does get an additional power, or strength rather, for each card in your opponent's hand, it is an answer to Flavisham if that comes down here. Unfortunately, in that case, Jackie would get 2 activations of the Flavisham, but a card that you're setting up there. Also, Quest for 2. We don't see the Flavisham. We do see the Grammatala here instead. Looking at the top 2 cards, Jackie's looking for some key pieces.
This is the aggravating thing whenever you're playing against this deck is they just draw so many cards. Everything they do replaces itself or gets them to their bigger plays. So the deck is just so well streamlined, so well built. You've got these you know, 3 drops, 4 drops, 5 drops that replace themselves, draw extra cards, get deeper into the deck. I mean, this deck is so well done. Look, there's one of the cards you're talking about that's been kind of making its way in here too with a Hideaway. It would be really impactful in this matchup too.
That's a great point. Hideaway is a card that's worked into these decks a lot of the times, and we are going to see it go to the Inkwell here because we have, I think, an uninkable problem in this hand right now. But it is a card that's very impactful in this matchup because one of Joseph's ways of closing out this game, in fact, the preferred way to close out this game, is to draw out a Be Prepared from his opponent or to play one himself and then follow that up with 1 or 2 Queen's Castles, which Jackie won't be able to answer in one turn usually. And so Hideaway is a great way to answer those castles in this matchup.
Yeah, that used to be game winning on the Amethyst side. If you got the castle after a Be Prepared, they don't attack it well, they don't deal with it well, and you're going to be drawing, you know, extra cards off it, hopefully, but you're going to get a ton of lore. Here we see another card that's changed quite a bit here, Olaf showing up. This is a new 1-drop in these decks. Not a new card or anything necessarily, but it's kind of new that these decks are doing this, and I have found that the reason for this happens to be that we've seen a lot of Amber Steel has been kind of a problem, and this one helps alleviate of, like, you could play this early and not have it get removed as easily.
That's exactly right. That's why we're seeing into this build is because songs like Strength of Raging Fire, I'm not Strength of Raging Fire, I'm sorry, but Let the Storm Rage On, which is a great turn to play off the Cinderella and the Steel Song decks, remove your early character, then not allowing you to bounce with Snake or other things you want to do. That's the biggest reason we're seeing Olaf make an appearance is to prevent that play. There's another reason to run it. That's if you're running Teeth and Ambitions, but we don't see that card run very often anymore. But it is another reason you would run Olaf rather than one of these other 1-drops.
And that's why we're seeing Crab kind of start to make its way back into the deck and getting a little bit more popular, making sure cards like Olaf can challenge correctly as the game goes on. You ever see one of those magical brooms? And I love the point that you made. This is another reason to, look, we see it right here. We see Fox coming down, getting to pick up. It's going to banish the broom, draw an extra card here, but let's say that was a smaller drop in some of your other matchups and it was just a 2-1 or a 1-1 like some of these other things, and it got removed. Now you're stuck with these, you know, these Madam Mims in your hand and nothing to do with it. So Olaf is a nice little piece that we've seen some of these players find to ensure that these play lines happen.
And we saw the Olaf quest go back to hand, Fox challenge into the Grand Matala, and now Olaf back in the board again, fresh and ready there. Now, we are getting into a critical point in the game here. We are at Be Prepared range. We have that Fishbone Quill in place. So we can ink an extra card per turn. And so a lot of the removal options for Jackie's deck are now available. He does have a Madame Medusa in hand. He also has the Be Prepared, I believe.
Yeah, there's a Be Prepared in Jackie's hand. Yeah. It's all the way in the back. You can barely see the edge of it.
Yep. So those options now available. So now it's getting to the point where Jackie's going to start taking over this game. Joseph, ideal, would like to be a lot higher on lore here. The other thing I haven't seen from Joseph yet, one of the keys to this Amethyst deck, or a lot of Amethyst decks, is getting your Rabbit online in the mid-game as fast as possible to start drawing multiple cards off that Rabbit, start to bounce with it. If you can get 2 cards off the Rabbit, great. If you get 4 cards off the Rabbit, really great. And it allows you to find those castles you need. Or those removal answers that Be Prepared for when the Tamatoa comes down later. We haven't seen a Rabbit yet, although I do see one in hand. I'm not sure if that was drawn this turn.
Yeah, just draw off the top, and here's the hard part. Joseph wants to deploy that Rabbit, but there's a Brawl in his hand here, which he's been keeping for exactly this, for the Haversam. And you need to answer this Flaversam. There's another Popsicle play. I don't know if you can let Jackie draw more cards than you over this game, because that's one of the ways that you win this game, is you just run them out of stuff eventually.
No, so that's a good point. You'd rather not see that Flaversham twice, but here, instead of the Brawl, we have the Madame Medusa coming down, removing that Flaversham. That's a great point. There's a sub-game in this matchup, which is Jackie wants to get his Flaversham online and get multiple activations out of it to draw into those cards in the late game. Joseph wants to prevent multiple activations of every Flaversham. And so getting that Flaversham off the board fast is key.
Absolutely. Popsicle is going to go ahead and get traded in for 2 more cards here.
Jackie's saying, I lost the one Flaversham, here comes another.
Yeah, they travel in pairs. There's always the backup.
Rats in packs.
Yeah, Jackie's probably pretty. Yeah. What's the noun for a group of Flaversams? Is it just, I don't know.
A flavor, I don't know.
A lot of them. Anyway,
all right,
back to the game. Yeah, and you can see, if I was Jackie, I'd be a little happy about the way the last turn worked out. Yeah, you got the Madame Medusa play and killed the Haversam, but that Brawl went to the Inkwell, and you mentioned that quite a bit here. Maybe not another answer for Joseph left over because you've got another Popsicle here ready to go late in the game, and you're okay with the way that this game's progressing, right, since you have that Be Prepared?
Yes, I mean, Jackie's doing what he needs to do, drawing cards here. Joseph would like to be a lot higher, have a lot more lore at this point in the game. You know, against any Amethyst deck, as soon as you get to 16 lore, especially when you have castles and goats available, that striking distance from the end of the game. And so Joseph needs to get to 14, 15, 16 lore before Jackie takes control of the board.
Yeah, and I think this is something that I kind of want to point out here. We see the rabbit get in play. It's going to draw an extra card. You talked about this, but now this rabbit has been exposed. There's no way for him to bounce it back to his hand, but if there is a Be Prepared here, not only going to sweep up the Olaf and the Madam, it's also going to get the Merlin Rabbit as well, and that's a card that's very impactful in this matchup. Maybe Joseph didn't have a way to protect it, but that's usually something that they're looking to do in these matchups, because you were mentioning this earlier, Rabbit's so impactful here at keeping up in card quantity as the game goes on.
That's true. So Jackie here with a big grip of cards. But one interesting note, as far as ink goes, hasn't been able to build that rather large ink advantage, which you're used to seeing from these Ruby Sapphire decks here. Not using that quill very much and missing that turn 2 ramp really hurt Jackie's momentum.
Yep, and Madame Medusa here goes ahead and takes out that rabbit. Doesn't need to use the Be Prepared here, doesn't want to use the Be Prepared here just yet, because he's got an answer to the rabbit in the Madame Medusa, and then it can actually challenge these characters as well the next turn. Maybe when to get a little more value off of his own characters before he sweeps up this board.
And here we do see Joseph draw into a castle. You'd be very excited to see that. Here, Singing Friends from the other side, a card that will allow him to draw 2 cards, a card from all the way back in set 1. And happy to draw this castle, though, because, again, one of his win conditions is drawing out that Be Prepared and then playing 2 or 3 castles. Because Jackie, other than the hideaways, and we've already seen one go into the Inkwell, I do see another one in hand, though. No one-shot answer if the board is clear. Jackie, though, with that hideaway, is probably going to think about holding on to that one
Speaking
a little longer here.
Speaking of one-shot answers, that's a Maui getting added to Joseph's hand. He's going to go ahead and take care of that. Haversam, send it packing. Second one this game that he's been able to take care of.
That's true.
Maui's sitting around here. Now I wonder, is this the turn that Jackie is going to finally deploy one of the sweepers? We'll have to see if that's one. Maybe he's thinking about that too. He's like, man, I'm worried about getting into a bad spot here with Castle. You can see these players definitely jockeying position, understanding this matchup quite well.
Yeah, it's definitely an option. He does have the hideaway because he would be afraid of the castle being played immediately on Joseph's side. So having that hideaway gives him a bit of insurance if he wants to sweep the board. Doesn't necessarily need to do it just yet, but again, look at this ink advantage. At this point in the game, usually a Ruby Sapphire player wants to be on, gosh, even like 10 or 11 ink. Just hasn't been able to build that advantage here.
He's got so many cards in his hand, he's accidentally dropping them onto the table, yeah.
So we do only have 2 lore on board. We have a Maui. We can answer one of those threats. We do have the Madame Medusa. We can use some targeted removal and save the Be Prepared.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the best way.
Options.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the best way to sequence all this out. It looks like he's just going to go ahead and start with the Maui. So the Maui's going to go ahead and let's see where this wants to challenge into. It's going to take care of the Madam, leave behind a little damage on the Maui.
Yeah, Madame Medusa can clean up that Olaf if necessary, if Jackie wants to do that, and probably something he's going to do. Again, Joseph wants to get 1, 2, or 3 lore a turn. At this point, dropping characters, questing 2 or 3 lore, has to get up to 14, 15, 16 to put himself within striking distance of his closers.
Yep. It looks like he's going to not ink, not use Fishman Quill yet again. All these cards wanted in Jackie's hand. If I'm Joseph, I'm getting a little scared here. Like, what do you have in your hand? You're not inking. You're not using Fishman Quill. Or is every card in your hand just the best card in your deck? It looks like Joseph's going to go ahead and play something for 6 here. It looks like a Madame Tremaine is going to be the play. This allows him to just clean up the entire board from Jackie here.
A Lady Tremaine here, forcing Jackie to choose and discard one of his characters. I'm guessing well, let's see. Not so concerned about the lore, but we will get rid of the Maui, leaving the 1 Lord Lady Tremaine on the board.
Another one of those elses that we were talking about left over. Going to go ahead and ink. The Maui's going to go ahead and clean up the board, leaving Joseph with the lone character. But going back over to Jackie, and there are a lot of cards in Jackie's hands here. See how he wants to play this turn.
Yeah, Lady Tremaine, a great card. Not as commonly played as Madame Medusa because it isn't a targeted removal necessarily. Your opponent can't play around it, but it does have 2 lore. And Joseph would have been happy to get that 2 lore off it. Jackie with the answer, though, we see the other lady in chairs, she called Lady Tremaine, coming down and removing Madame Medusa, or Lady Tremaine immediately.
The Lady in Chairs mirror. Joseph's going to go ahead and have another big follow-up here. It looks like, well, all right, so the castle is finally going to get deployed here. It looks like double castle is going to get deployed here. Jackie, answer to one of them in the hand. Let's see if he's going to be able to take care of both of them this turn. I don't know if he's going to be able to do both, though.
The Madame Medusa will be able to take care of some. Another Maui would answer it nicely. Joseph has seen several Mauis, though, already discarded, making the calculation that's probably not there. We've also seen a hideaway go into the Inkwell, so hoping that there aren't the answers. But as you pointed out, the hideaway is there. We'll be able to do some damage to the other castle. So at the very least, if Jackie wants to remove that threat, only one will be available to gain lore at the start of the next turn.
Yeah, we'll see how Jackie wants to sequence his turn. That hideaway has been brought to the front of the hand, though. You got to believe that's going to be played for sure this turn. So it looks like we're going to start off with a Haversam. It's going to go ahead and get rid of that Fishbone Quill, draw 2 cards, get all the information before we make our choices here. Looks like an Ice Block and a Brawl added to hand. The 2's going to go ahead, and one of those hideaways is going to put the Queen's Castle away. To follow up this with an Ice Block, a nice little item to be able to have behind here for that Haversam for next turn as well, to maybe change that into some extra cards, or use it to use some removal here. We'll have to see. The Brawl pairs well with it, which looks like it's going to go to the Inkwell. I think there's another one as well, and a little bit of questing here. I'm sorry, attacking into the Queen's Castle here for Jackie as well. So back over to Joseph here. Let's see how he wants to prepare from here. 2 lore gained from the castle. All the way up to 10 here. Jackie's still at 2.
Yeah, Joseph forcing a response from Jackie there, but would have loved to save those castles, I think, for later, but wanted to get a little aggressive here. Now at 10 lore. Again, Jackie, it's an interesting game here because, Joseph has not been able to race ahead like we would have liked. Now sweeping the board with the Be Prepared, leaving that castle there open, and unless we have a Maui, we're going to get another 2 lore off of it, but Joseph kind of feels that the script is off for Jackie here. Jackie not doing what you normally see the Ruby Sapphire decks doing in the endgame. And so taking a shot with these castles early, and now probably, I don't see another hideaway, and I don't see a Maui, so probably going to get another 2 lore out of this, going to 12, and at some point, the goats and goat bounces are going to become, are going to allow him to close out the game.
Absolutely. Saw Joseph finish off his turn there, the friends on the other side, so a little extra gas added to the hand here, too, for his next turn. Looks like we're going to get a big play from Jackie here. It's a Sisu. Doesn't kill anything, but this is a good challenger, and it quests for 3, and it can take down that castle next turn as well, possibly.
Yeah, Jackie at the bare minimum wanted to get something on the board that could deal with that castle. Sisu may have been the only thing available there, the others being Maleficent. And so really forced to play that if he wanted to keep that castle from being online for more than 1 turn.
Yeah, Flynn Rider added to the hand here from Joseph. Let's see what the play is. Looks like we're going to start with a goat, gain a lore.
Let's see. We'd love to have the Fox here or Snake to bounce it.
Yeah, I
don't need it.
I think Joseph's at 13 lore now.
Yeah, that'll be correct.
Olaf as well.
And then back over to Jackie. So no bounce on the goat. I think that's okay for Joseph. We are looking at 13 lore. The goat represents 14 lore. Jackie now has numerous cards he needs to deal with because at this point in the game, once this deck gets up to 13, 14 lore, every lore matters. Every single lore matters.
Yeah, you don't want to get to the spot where, we talked about this before, where the goat gets bounced. You get to play goat, bounce goat, play goat in a turn, and all of a sudden, the game gets won from anything when you didn't think it was possible because there were no characters in play, or only 1 character in play that, quested for maybe 1 or 2. You didn't realize there was going to be an extra 2, 3, or 4 this turn from hand.
And for Jackie, the challenge is, in these scenarios, that Jackie now has to spend resources every single turn responding to threats on the other side. Some of them are very efficient, like that Maleficent, which leaves you a big character on the board while removing an opponent's character. But if you're spending time dealing with your opponent's threats, whether they be castles or characters on the board, you're not advancing your win condition necessarily, getting the Tamatoa or the Lucky Dime in this case on board. So Jackie not able to take turns setting up the end game, or even spending turns using the how far all goes there. We have 2 of them in hand. Would love to be doing that to look for the cards that he wants, but instead forced to spend an entire turn playing a Maleficent because Joseph has pushed his lore so high.
Yeah, lore up to 15. Go ahead and Be Prepared here to take care of those characters from Jackie. And does he have a follow-up here behind it? Still got that Flynn Rider, I believe, in his hand. Looks like that is going to be the deployment here. Yep, Flynn Rider. And pass on over to Jackie.
Fun card to play here. Again, unfortunately, Jackie does have the removal for it. Joseph hoping that he didn't. But again, Jackie's forced to spend resources here dealing with that rather than doing other things.
Yeah, a couple of options here, too. The small Sisu here can take care of it along with the Ice Block is one of the ways that could possibly happen here this turn. Jackie doing a good job of hiding his hand from us here as well. So it matters I was going to say, I believe we should start a turn off with how far I'll go. Get a little more information. 1 card to hand, 1 card into ink. Another dragon picked up for Jackie here.
It's a great, you keep mentioning this, but to highlight your point, in any turn where you're planning on drawing cards, as you've mentioned numerous times, it is almost always best to do the card draw action first, even if you know exactly what you want to do afterwards, even if you're 99% sure, because what you draw can change your actions drastically. And so Good sequence there from Jackie.
Yeah, just get all the information first. Let's see all of our options. They may not change. You might still want to do the same thing, but let's at least get all the information before we make any real choices here. Huge lore lead for Joseph here, but you're starting to see the game start to slip away just a little bit with a pass here and no plays. And Jackie with a handful of big plays here. Multiple dragons. Got a Sisu, another how far I'll go. See a brawl, a be prepared. Jackie's got answers for days.
Yeah, at this point, Joseph, as you suggested, kind of where he wants to be in terms of lore, in terms of ink. The one thing he's missing is that draw engine. We need a rabbit. We need something to recharge the hand. We need to find those goats. Every goat represents 2 lore, more lore if you have the fox or a bounce card in hand. But at this point, just running out of gas and with very little in hand left.
Jackie with a embarrassment of riches here in his hand, taking his time, trying to figure out what he wants to do here. Another how far I'll go was brought in this turn. Add another card to the hand, another card to the inkwell. So I'm really, really be patient with this card. This card's been in his hand for 20 minutes now in this match. But you can see the power of that card even early, even late. It's pretty good. It looks like he's just going to go ahead and shift a big Sisu and start questing. So we're up to 5 now for Jackie. And this is what the blue-red deck does. It's going to control the board, you'll get a big lore lead on it, but it's going to close the door real fast when it starts to win.
Yeah, now it's amazing how quickly that can swing. And now Joseph thinking about how can I answer this Sisu. Here we have the frenemy coming down and a snake bouncing the frenemy and probably will play it again. There it is. So now representing 2 threats that Jackie has to deal with. Of course, Jackie with the answers. One big answer if he wants to play it.
Yeah, a couple of different ways to take it here. Let's see how Jackie wants to play on his turn. Fishbone Quill added. I think we're a little possibly past that card, but you never know. Might just want to get an item into play.
Yeah, so Stone found a Tematoa. I will mention the ice block here. It's an interesting card. You know, when this deck first came out, you know, the people who kind of created it, in the early days, it was referred to as Sisu on Ice. Now, this deck was around a little bit before that, but where it really came into its own is the Sisu on Ice build, where we had the Sisu, you had the ice blocks that allow you to manipulate your opponent's character's strength. And then the ice block kind of fell out of favor for a little while because Sisu fell out of favor a little bit and started to get replaced with a lot of the Be Prepareds. Now, one of the reasons I think we may see more ice blocks this tournament is because the proliferation of anti-song cards, especially the Ursula Deceivers, have really started. And so Ursula Deceivers around that set, but Pete, the referee, which can prevent you from playing an action, that's a very dangerous card for a deck that's relying on Be Prepared to reset the board at certain times. And so because of that, you've started to see these Ruby Sapphire players working Be Prepareds out of their decks, or at least reducing the numbers in favor of the Sisus. And so I think where Ice Block was kind of out of favor for a while, we may see it start to come back in this tournament. And an example of that here, where we see it here matched with a large number of Sisus.
Yeah, Sisu and Ice was probably the deck I would have chosen for this tournament if I had to actually choose one to play here this week. It was that or Steel Song for one of the two. But I love what you made there. Ice Block, every time I have to play against it, it's so annoying. It's just so good in so many spots here. And Jackie, again, with just so many answers. Rabbit was deployed by Joseph here, drew an extra card. No way to manipulate this, though. No way to get extra cards here, keep getting deep. And we see that Maleficent into play yet again. Rabbit is going to get 2 cards, though. That's pretty good. Lucky Dime was deployed last turn for Jackie here as well. And we've talked about this. I love getting the Dime out early before you start playing your characters in a matchup where both players have a lot of removal. Because it's kind of like your characters can quest the turn they come into play when you have the Dime set up beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, at some point in any of these games, you have to take sometimes a whole turn slamming that Lucky Dime on board, getting it on the line. But yeah, it represents instant lore game anytime you play a character on board, and there's some high lore characters on this deck. Jackie here checking the discard pile of Joseph, seeing what's in play. Might be looking for rabbits, might be looking for goats. The discard pile, of course, is free information for your opponent. You can check it anytime or ask what's in there.
Yeah, I think it's a good point that you made there. I think Goat is definitely one of the cards that he's really looking for here, or ways to bounce, because that's how he loses the game from here. With Joseph being at 15, I'd be a little more worried if he's at 16, 17, 18, to possibly losing in a turn from some kind of Goat shenanigans, because there were turns where Joseph played no cards, but had cards left over in his hand. All right, we see I think that's a castle that just got deployed.
Castle deployed. We do have Maleficent on the board, which can answer that castle immediately.
Yeah, so maybe Joseph has something behind this as well. Oh, second
2
castle.
castles. Okay.
So they come in pairs this game.
Apparently. Okay, so this is an interesting play. 2 castles on board. The Maleficent will, of course, be able to answer 1. This is now all 4 castles that we've seen this game. So Joseph or Jackie would need an answer for the other one in order to prevent that 2 lore gain. And getting up to 17 lore is very, very dangerous for Joseph because that puts him 1 goat and bounce away from winning the game.
Now we see a Visions of the Future from Jackie here. Is he going to be able to find possibly a second answer to this castle, be able to answer the second one?
Now, we've seen a hideaway played already. I think we saw another hideaway go to the Inkwell.
Yeah.
So 2 have been played, and I think 2 is about the number that a lot of players will run. Sometimes 3, but 2 I think is probably most common because it is situational. A Maui wouldn't do it on its own. It is amazing what 2 lore represents here because at 15 lore, you're pretty comfortable that drawing into a goat or a fox or whatever won't close out the game. But as soon as Joseph now draws into a goat and is able to draw that bounce card, that's it.
Yeah,
or 2 goats.
Absolutely. I mean, you can see that weighing on Jackie's mind here. He's taking a long time to figure out what's the best play here, and you can't blame him. I mean, he went from, hey, like I have this game kind of locked up to, oh, this is one of the ways that I can lose.
Yeah, and so, I mean, a Tamatoa here, there's 2 items on board. So the Tamatoa would have 3. You could pull back a popsicle. Tamatoa would then be 4 lore. You could quest for 6. Because that's another option here, right? With a lucky dime on board, Jackie knows I can take care of the 1 castle, and maybe instead of finding that hideaway, maybe I put enough on the board to threaten game next turn.
And I think that's what he's thinking about here because it does look like the Tamatoa was added to hand here. And sometimes your best defense is a good offense. And it looks like that's what Jackie's going to be doing here. He's going to get back a popsicle, so he's going to go ahead and be able to play that popsicle, draw another card here if he wants, but he won't be able to. Has he inked yet this turn?
I do not remember.
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, there we go. Perfect one off the top. Tipo goes into the ink. That allows him to activate the lucky dime. I think this gets, what, 4 or 5?
4 lore.
Yeah, we got 4 lore.
Off the dime, and then Maleficent will, of course, have to deal with that castle.
Yep.
They're going up to 12 there for Jackie. And now we have 6 lore on the board. Well, more. I mean, so we have 6 lore on the board, plus the dime represents another 4. So that's 10 lore that Jackie will be able to gain next turn. And so, yeah, threatening game here next turn. So Jackie says, all right, I see your castles. You can have that 2 lore. If you don't have the cards for it, I threaten game. Or you could have a Be Prepared and sweep my 2 characters off the board.
And hold on here. That's a Be Prepared from Joseph. That is a huge play here. Kind of holding back that lucky dime. He's still got the castle sitting around and a Sisu, which quests for 2. A small Sisu got played here. He's at 17. He's setting up here that if either one of these cards survive into the next turn, a goat off the top ends it.
Yep, and that castle will most definitely survive. We don't see the hideaway. We do see the Maui again, but that's the power of castle. Maui is a fantastic answer for both threats in this game, but with 6 strength, the 7 willpower castle is such a threat, and that's what makes it so powerful. So Jackie here will play the Maleficent, get rid of the Sisu. It will allow him to answer the castle next turn, but no answer for it this turn. We might see the Maui played here. No, instead we'll use the ink to get 2 lore off Maleficent, but golly, now at this point, Joseph talk decking for that goat. Jackie knows that Joseph has the game in hand if he draws the right card.
Yeah, I like using the dime here to give yourself the best chance to win next turn as well if you just game only goes 1 more turn. All right, so 2 lore there. Added for Joseph, up to 19.
And the rabbit?
Rabbit.
Look for the goat.
Is it another goat?
It's
a 4.
It's King Undisputed? Okay.
That's huge as well. That goes ahead and answers the dragon. What a game we've got here. This is going back and forth. The dragon has been answered. That means the castle is going to sit around for another turn. And
now we could have game here. A Tamatoa will pull back the popsicle. That'll get you up to 5 lore on the Tamatoa. That's 1 short of winning. If you had another popsicle, I have to check the ink.
All right, so we can Grandma Talia. If we get Grandma Talia and find a Tamatoa, do we have enough ink here?
Well, at this point, you have to answer that castle. That's the problem.
I'm trying. If you can't answer the castle, I'm trying to win this turn.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
Yeah,
there you go. But unfortunately, I think the ink is going to be the problem because you have to have the Tamatoa and the dime, which is 10 ink, plus whatever you need to find, and then you need to play another popsicle. So it's really tough. I mean, I do think that answering the castle here is really where you need to go, but you need 2 Mauis.
I would say 2 Mauis gets it done. We already have 1 in the hand. I'm trying to think of how does Jackie get out of this.
I don't imagine there's another hideaway. I imagine there's 2 in this list. I could be wrong.
All right, so card chosen. It looks like a Vision. All right, so we're going to go 5 cards deeper.
Yep, take a look.
Here we go. We're getting to the ink problem that you're talking about. We're starting to run low on ink.
Yep, so it won't be enough to close out this game most likely, but you need another Maui perhaps. But again, not enough for 2 Mauis, so.
Yeah, another quick look here. Looks like 7 ink, could possibly ink for this turn, so it could go up to 8. I see a Tamatoa now, but I don't think you have enough left over to get that done this turn.
No.
If Joseph wins this game, what a game. There was a couple turns here where I did not think he was going to be able to pull this one out. But he was very patient.
Drawing into all 4 castles is great, especially, I mean, we didn't get Joseph's, like a significant draw engine going with the rabbit bounces. In fact, other than this rabbit, I think we saw one other rabbit. It was only played, then it was removed immediately, getting you 2 cards instead of 4. And so not being able to dig as much as you like, still finding all 4 castles, being able to double play them twice is really the key to victory here.
Looks like a popsicle. We're going to go a card deeper. That was another ice block that doesn't get it done, and that's going to be game for Joseph. What a back and forth game between these two. Wow. I was on the edge of my seat for the last few turns there, Liam.
Yeah, I mean, again, this deck, the Ruby Amethyst deck, I think, is generally favored into this matchup. Some people say generally favored. Some people say very favored. Depends which camp you're in. It depends on who's piloting it. But in this matchup, we didn't see it do necessarily what it wanted to do early. We did get some early lore off the Chernobog's followers, but you would ideally like to follow that with a Frenemy and a Sisu and really drive that lore total early. And we didn't quite get there. But on the other side, the Ruby Sapphire deck also not getting there, didn't get the early turn ramp. It went late. This game went late, which is usually where you think the Ruby Sapphire deck has an edge. But wow.
Yeah, just unbelievable game. You guys couldn't see it. We were like leaning around, trying to catch the cards, trying to get the right ones, trying to see what they were looking at from vision to see which ones they were going to get. And I was at the edge of my seat that whole game. What an absolute master game that we've already had this early in the tournament. We have to live up to these. We have to follow these up. They have to play a game 2 after this.
Play a game 2.
I would be emotionally drained after that one, and I don't know if I could keep up. So let's see if these players themselves can keep up in this game 2 as we head back down to the feature match area and try to finish up this round. I hope this game is as good as that one. This is an amazing way to start off our Disney Lorcana challenge here in Las Vegas. Unbelievable patience shown off by Joseph there. I don't think I would have won the game from his seat.
Maybe not. That's the thing about these decks. It's oftentimes when you're playing against a control deck, especially Ruby Sapphire, you have to think of it as a 2-phase game where in the early game, before they get to their removal answers, especially Be Prepared, you're trying to drive your lure total as high as possible. And then when we do have access to Be Prepared and there are other removal answers like Mana Medusa, Lady Tremaine if they're running it, or a Sisu, you have to close out the game with your castles, with your goats, with your win conditions. So doing it just right there. Now, for Jackie can win this game. I mean, these Ruby Sapphire decks are very good, and this matchup surely isn't guaranteed for the Ruby Amethyst deck, but Jackie has to be on his kind of ideal opening. And one of the one of the key turns for Jackie that he didn't hit last game is turn 2, where you need to hit your ramp, either one jump ahead or ideally a Tipo, who can then sing one jump ahead, because you need to get to your 7, your 6, your 7, your 8 ink as fast as possible. The other key to this matchup, as we mentioned earlier, is that sub-game of getting the Flavisham online. Jackie needs to get an item on board early to get that Flavisham online on turn 2, ideally, or in turn 4 or turn 3 if you're ramping. Ideally get 2 or 3 activations out of it, while Joseph is thinking about how do I get that Flavisham offline as soon as possible.
Yeah, we see an Olaf into a Flynn Rider here. A very problematic opening, possibly for Jackie, but it does look like he has one of his early characters here in that Gaston that's going to be able to keep away that triple lore from Flynn Rider here. One of the better ways to answer that, we've seen Argus in the past in this deck as one of the answers for that, because Flynn Rider, one of the real problematic cards here early.
It's really fun when you see a meta card, a card that's worked in, that's a meta call, doing exactly what it's in there to do. For example, last game we saw Hideaway, which is used primarily to deal with castles, also sometimes a dime, but primarily with castles. And here we have Gaston, who's in there probably to overpower the frenemies, more often than not, doing exactly that and overpowering the frenemy.
All right, let's see. It does have Reckless here.
Yeah, Reckless meaning it will have to challenge into that Olaf. So here we have, I don't think we saw the turn 2, but we do have the third turn Fishbone Quill, which is what you want to see. And we are singing one jump ahead with the Gaston. So it doesn't have to challenge if it can sing.
Yeah, really, really powerful turn from Jackie there, getting to add a ton to his Inkwell. So he's jumped up way high in an ink lead, even going, I was going to say, up to 5 here already. We're at 4 here for Joseph. It's going to turn into a Merlin Crab, and that's going to allow, we talked about this in game 1, this allows Olaf to really challenge really, really well here. And we see these crabs do a ton of work. But again, that puts another 3 strength character into play. You gotta be a little worried if you're Jackie here. You need to be able to answer this Flynn Rider. It looks like he did find one here in a brawl, but this Grandma Talia does the exact same as well. Keeps that lower total from getting that extra bump from Flynn Rider.
True. Had to answer the Flynn Rider, and luckily had the answer. Getting to look for a card in the process. Back over to Joseph. Joseph having not I won't say the ideal opening, but definitely the cards you want early. The Frenemy, some 3-strength characters, doing what he wanted to do. But Jackie with the answer here, overpowering that Frenemy.
Looks like Merlin Crab's going to go ahead and sing Friends on the other side here, get 2 new cards into Joseph Garcia's hand. And what more does he want to do here this turn? Got a lot of ink, got a lot of cards.
I'm staring very intently at Joseph's hand. We do have the Brawl there, which will answer Flavisham if it comes into play.
We have a Snake here as well. That's going to go to the Inkwell, though.
That's true. Now, at some point here in the mid-game, Joseph would love to draw into a Rabbit, get that card draw going so that we can find those goats and those double or triple castles to seal this game.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be double one-drop here, though. Broom into Olaf and back over to Jackie.
Yeah, Joseph going wide here, kind of inviting that be prepared, trying to draw it out early. With the Fishbone Quill, I think we could have played it with an ink, but Jackie low on cards, so instead just playing the Maui.
It's going to go ahead and challenge into the Merlin Crab here. A little bit of damage to be left over on that Maui. Grandma Talia's going to go ahead and quest here as well, and that kind of sends some warning bells up to Joseph here as well. Maybe that Be Prepared is looming in the hand if he's going to go ahead and start questing here.
That's true. Now, we are missing the damage counters on the Maui. Just one note for the audience, I think.
Yep.
So we'll just note that once. We'll see if that comes into play later.
Go up to 6 here. Looks like Lady Tremaine going to go ahead and take care of that Grandma Talia. Going to draw a card here off Magic Broom since we played a character as well. Yes, Maui's still left over.
And Maui, again, with the Reckless, will be forced to challenge into that Olaf. Grandma Talia coming down now, looking for some more cards. We're digging here. And Maui, not only a great card to have in play for defense, but also with that 6 strength. So we do have the 1. Okay, so we are missing those 3 damage counters. I think it should be at 1. Unless I'm mistaken, unless there's some effect that I didn't quite see.
Yeah, maybe we missed something there, yeah. Back over to Joseph, though, staring down this Maui. Looks like the lady in chair is going to go ahead and take out.
It didn't matter in the end
well.
because we had the 4 strength necessary to deal with the Maui.
Right.
So now that Frenemy there threatening, if we have another high lore character, we have the Rabbit. That's great. Joseph wants to get that online, drawing a card there.
He's debating inking for a turn, maybe deploying one more thing to the board, though. Got to be a little careful in these spots about how much you want to deploy to the board. It does look like he's going to go ahead and say go.
Yeah, and I do think we saw a goat go into the Inkwell, which is interesting to note. Definitely a card can be used for ink in the early game, but cards that he wants available in the late game as well. So if we get into a point where we're drawing for those goats, we have seen one now used for ink.
Brawl used on the Rabbit there of Joseph, and it does get him another card here. Draws one for his turn. It looks like that's going to be the only play for Jackie here this turn after questing. It sends it right back over to Joseph. Joseph has a Maui of his own. It looks like he's going to go ahead and challenge the Grandma here. The damage is going to go on here.
And this will definitely invite a response from Jackie because now that Maui with its 6 strength is going to make Frenemy really likely to activate. But I don't think we have the answers here. We have the... How far I'll go. We do have the Sisu.
Yeah, I was going to say, it doesn't look like there's an answer right away here. Card drawn to hand, Lucky Dime. That card, I was going to say, that card goes to the Inkwell, not to the bottom.
Yeah, we do have the Sisu, but no Ice Block to pair with it to get rid of that Frenemy.
Yeah, we do have a Brawl here, though, that can deal with the Flynn Rider there. That way you're not getting the extra lore off the Maui here early turn. It does look like the Fishbone Quill is going to get activated and put card into the Inkwell for Jackie. Really, really ramping up here, getting a ton of ink as well. Got that Lucky Dime left over his hand, so things can start to change around pretty quickly.
So we could see the Lucky Dime slam to the Inkwell here. These turns going by very quick. But one thing to note on Jackie's hand, we did have a Flavisham go into the Inkwell. And so the hand's starting to run out here. Vision to the future, fantastic card to draw, enabling Jackie to look for cards that he wants or needs. Another Flavisham would be nice.
It does look like he found one here. I saw Flavisham, I saw Sisu. I think that was a Haversam that was taken off the top here for Jackie.
I think it was as well. I think we'll likely see that eat the Fishbone Quill.
Yep.
Instead of slamming the Lucky Dime. We mentioned last game, this is definitely a card you at some point need to take a turn off to get on the board to start representing instant lore every time you play a character. And Jackie willing to take a turn off here. The Sisu represents 2 lore on Joseph's side, But oh, here we have the castle.
Yeah, that was castle was drawn off the top by Joseph here. Really good draw for him, and I believe he moved the Sisu over to the castle as well. So looking to draw an extra card here if something isn't done about said Sisu.
When we talk about meta cards doing meta calls, doing meta things, we do have the hideaway in Jackie's hand. There it goes, sending that to the inkwell. That card again, probably in here. Yes, some for the mirror to deal with your opponent's lucky dime, but also to deal with castles. A great answer that's been added this set.
Yeah, it looks like the Madam's going to come down and take care of the Sisu because there's only a couple cards left over in Jackie's hand, and then add it to the inkwell, and then activating a lucky dime to get a lore here. Lore total is a little low for Joseph here in the spot where you want to be around this point in time in the game, but here we go. Drew one of the 4 drops on top. That was a really good one to draw too. That's a rabbit off the top, and did he draw a snake? I was going to say a fox. So this is really, really good for Joseph here.
Well, and Jackie now, we did see the Flavisham going to the inkwell. Jackie now, I believe, is top decking, drawing the only card he's going to play each turn.
Yeah, we'll have to see how does.
Challenging scenario here. Another castle would be backbreaking from Joseph.
It was something big, and that's a Tamatoa here from Jackie. He's going to go ahead and immediately make use of it. Get, I think, 3 lore here right away off the turn.
That is a fantastic top deck.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge character, tons of willpower, tons of lore off the top here. I think if there wasn't a really good top deck from Jackie here, Joseph was going to start to run away with the game here, but it looks like that Tamatoa top deck is going to get this a little bit closer. Joseph, though, tons of cards left over his hands. He had another rabbit. I thought I saw another castle.
Yeah, I mean, a fantastic card to have on the board. Not only now we're representing, we can challenge any castle with these 2, but you're representing that lore every turn off the lucky dime, which just accelerates as you get more items on the board. And it can pull back items if you get a Flavisham online, start to get that item engine going, or that card draw engine going.
Fox is going to go ahead and start off the turn by getting a lore for Joseph here. He does have Lady Tremaine here. It's going to be able to answer at least one of these. So it looks like start off with the rabbit, get the extra card here, take a look. Like a brawl added to hand here. Doesn't take care of any of the problems over on Jackie's side. Yeah, brawl go into the inkwell. Go ahead and deploy the castle as well. And so this is an interesting spot. You deploy castle where it's able to be taken down already with the cards that are in play. But this means that Tamatoa isn't questing. You're not getting challenged into as well. So this is a spot where it's like, hey, you pick what the problem is. I'm presenting multiple of them.
Yeah, I mean, it'll force, at this point, Jackie, unless he has another Maui in hand, to devote both those characters to clearing out that castle, making them not only so they're not questing this turn, even though you're getting the left of the dime, but also making them vulnerable to a challenge from Maui and some other removal answers. So
yeah, and I like this play because it happens, and then it allows Joseph to get value off his own Maui, too, because it forces some of these characters to be exerted. It looks like a Popsicle was the card taken off the top, and that was turned into another Tamatoa off the top here. I don't know. Do we have enough ink to do all of this? Looks like we might. He's going to go ahead and pop the Popsicle, go ahead and quest for 3. So to get the Popsicle back, he's going to be able to either, as well, he's going to be able to put this into the inkwell if he wants and put a second Tamatoa into play, but nope, he's going to go ahead and play the Popsicle, draw a card off the top. That's a baby Sisu, 3-drop Sisu.
We quest with Maui, played the Popsicle. That'll add another lore to Maui. So if we activate the dime, that's extra lore we're getting. 1, 2, 3, 4 off that. So yeah, definitely Jackie choosing to ignore the threats on the opposing side of the board here and push towards 20, try to close this thing out. I mean, Joseph, of course, has answers. There's always the be prepared. I don't know if he has one in hand. I didn't see one, but definitely an option. We do have the rabbit. We can send the rabbit into a threat to draw another card if we need to.
Yeah, and so Jackie not able to deal with that library, which is kind of a problem, but he did push himself up to 14 lore, and you really have to start worrying about you might lose the game here next turn with this Tamatoa in play. It does look like the Maui's going to go ahead and trade in and take care of the character from Jackie. Brawl's going to take care of Sisu. And a rabbit, I was going to say, later Tremaine is going to go ahead and take care of the last character here from Jackie, and then the rabbit and the fox are going to quest up to 2. It's going to put Joseph to 11. And now we're back on Jackie. I think one card left his hand. Does he have a big play here?
He does have the Tamatoa, I believe. He drew another one last turn, I think.
That's right. There's another Popsicle off the top here as well.
So I don't think it's quite enough to close it, but pretty close. We'll get 1, 2, 3. With that other Popsicle, we'll have 4. So 5 lore total going up to 19. If you top deck into another Popsicle, you can close it out.
If you top deck into an Inkable, can you get this done? Can you play the Popsicle, find an Inkable, play the Inkable, play Tamatoa, activate Dime? Is that
7, 8.
1, 2, 3?
Yeah.
Is that still short?
I think so. If I'm doing the math here, I think that's 8 set off to the side for the Tamatoa. I think you're right. So now we can't play the popsicle and activate the dime. That's the
Yeah.
challenge here. So yeah, you're right. You'd have to play the popsicle, hope for an inkable, allowing you to do both in the same turn.
Yeah, it does. Is that the line that Jackie wants to take? It doesn't look like he's going to start
Nope.
off with the Tamatoa and then just activate the dime for 4. So it's going to
Yep.
put him up to 18.
Representing game next turn. And really, I mean, at this point, even if we can deal with the Tamatoa, any 2 lore character closes out the game for Jackie. But looking on the other side here, we're going to go up to 13 lore, and we have 14, 15, 16, 17.
Yeah, but does he have a way to answer this Tamatoa?
I mean, I'm trying to see if we can win this turn with a go.
Sure. All right, so that's 4 more lore. He's up to 17.
No, you need a goat, a snake.
I
and
see. I
think
see.
you could do it.
I see a snake. All right, so we're going to start with snake. It's going to pick up.
Okay.
It's going to pick up Lady Tremaine.
Yep.
So we can at least answer the Tamatoa, but that means Jackie's going to have to find something that has 2 lore next turn because Lucky Dime is in play.
We have the popsicle, so we can see 2 cards. But Joseph definitely threatening game here. And unfortunately, I think where we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. So is that game with just the castle? If the math on the bottom is right, it's not. So even a be prepared from Jackie would buy
So
another turn.
Jackie has to win the game here, right? So it looks like is that Fishbone? It looks like Fishbone Quill at the top. Popsicle's going to draw into Brawl.
Oh dear.
I don't think that's going to be enough. And Joseph, I think it's going to get a 2-0 here in one of the better matches I've seen in a long time.
That was a great matchup. Oh dear. I mean, he set himself up perfectly. You pointed out perfectly. Just needed a 2 lore character, win you the game with that lucky dime, and couldn't fight it there. And wow, great job by the Ruby Amethyst player there.
This is actually one of the better matches I've seen in quite a while. Great play from both sides, a lot of back and forth, and a lot of spots where you see the players really understand the matchup and like what's important, how to play around things. You saw him really play the castles at the correct time, or like try to sequence them into better, try to force his opponent into be preparing so he could play the castle. And then Jackie was like, I'm just not going to be prepared. I'm going to do something else.
Yeah.
And I thought this was some unbelievable play from both players.
I mean, it is, and the difference in this matchup really is the castle. It is a card that a lot of decks have had trouble dealing with. This deck has had trouble with dealing with all of the last meta. You don't have a good answer for it other than the Maui and plus something else. The hideaways help, and we did see hideaways used in both games here, but not enough. And castle's a crucial part of the victory here for the Ruby Amethyst deck each time.
All right, that's going to do it here for round 1. Midoko Anywhere. We have a short break, but right after that, Rebekah's got a very special interview with you, and then we'll be back with more Disney's Lorcana.
Don't go away.
Lumineers, we are here with Disney Lorcana illustrator Kendall Hale. Welcome, Kendall.
Hey, good to be here.
Yeah, how has your experience been here at the Disney Lorcana Challenge here in Vegas so far?
Oh my gosh, it's so fun, and everyone is so nice.
They are. This community is the best, and this is the first time that you've been at a Lorcana Challenge. Is this your first time interacting with the community?
To this level, yeah, I meet fans here and there at stores, but never like so many all at one time. It makes me feel really good about myself.
Yes. Well, I've seen the tables over there, and there are people lining up to meet you, and they know that you've done some amazing cards for Disney Lorcana, and I think some of the cards you're most well known for are the 7 Dwarves that came out in Rise of the Floodborn, and they're this beautiful panoramic picture that connects them all together. Can you talk a little bit about how that came about?
Yeah, absolutely. So they were offered to me by the team, and they said, "Do you want to do all 7 dwarves?" And yes, please, I'd love to. And so they gave me the briefs, and then I was thinking, and I've seen in other card games that sometimes the cards will connect in the pictures, and then you can line them all up. And I thought, what a great idea! This is my one shot to do that.
Yes.
So I came up with what I wanted in the background, and I pitched the idea back to the game team, and they said, "Oh yeah, we thought about asking you to do this," and I was like, "Yeah, but you didn't. I came up with it," and they were like, "Yeah, so go for it." And I watched the movie to see what kind of backgrounds would work best for the dwarves, and found some good pictures of the cottage to work off of, and it all came together.
Yes, and it came together so beautifully. And you have some other beautiful cards as well. Han's 13th in Line is one of my favorites. You have the Daisy Musketeer Spy, which is really fun. And then you also have a couple of non-character cards. And I know for an artist that can sometimes present a little bit of a challenge when you don't have a character as the main focal point. Stolen Scimitar, the Potion of Might. Talk a little bit about those cards.
So when they offer you cards, that you don't get to always pick what you get. Actually, you rarely get to pick what you get. But at the time that they offered me these cards, I had some extra time in my schedule, and I just went for it. Doing the sword was, I love Aladdin, and getting to draw the mysterious hand shadow above it. It wasn't a character, but it adds that element of a story, and so I could get behind that. And then Potion of Might was really fun because as I'm doing it, you ask well, how many people are going to know what this is, and it becomes a conversation piece.
Yeah.
And so I've had people come up and be like, "Is this from an actual movie?" And you're like, "Oh yeah, go back and watch this one and try to find it." And then they're like, "Oh yeah."
Yeah, it's so fun. All these hidden gems and all these, golden nuggets from the Disney movies that you have brought to life. And speaking of favorite movies, what are some of your favorite Disney movies?
Oh my
If
God.
imagine you're 9 years old, sitting at home watching a Disney film, what was it?
9-year-old me was probably Aladdin.
Yeah.
I love when Jafar turns into a giant snake, and I was all about monsters and giant beasts and stuff. So Beast from Beauty and the Beast was one of my favorites. The giant snake in Aladdin, and then at the end of Fantasia, the Night on Bald Mountain with Chernabog. I would pause the screen and then I'd put a paper on my TV and try to trace the picture of Chernabog, so I'd have it with me.
That's amazing. So you've been a fan of Disney and an artist ever since you were young.
Yeah, way little. We're 4 or 5 years old. Easy.
Wow. Well, then Disney Lorcana seems like a dream come true for you.
Just a little bit.
A little bit. Well, we're so glad to have you as part of Disney Lorcana. Thank you for joining me today, and we're going to go back to the team.
Welcome back, Illumineers, to the Disney Lorcana Challenge here in Las Vegas. You just saw a great interview by Rebekah for Kendall Hale. I'm very excited that they have some of the illustrators here. I know it's something that the fans have been asking for since Atlanta. As early as that, I can remember talking to some people there. So that's really exciting, but we also have a ton of players here. This is the very first challenge since Shimmering Skies has been legal, so I'm very eager to see how all these players are innovating on this brand new format. My name is Brandon. I'm joined by Brendan Patrick. Brendan, how are you feeling today?
Amazing. The environment here on the floor is just incredible. I had the chance to walk around and see some of our players, talk about some of the matchups that have been going down in rounds 1 and 2. And it's just, there's so much excitement here. We're in Las Vegas, almost 2,000 players cracking into that new metagame. It's just crazy to see, what's going to come out on top. What are our top 3 decks? And luckily, we actually do have the data here for what that looks like here at the Disney Lorcana Challenge here in Las Vegas.
We do. I'm so excited to get into this. As you can see, we have much over 1,800 players, almost 1,900 players competing today. And there's been a lot of talk about the big three, right? We've got Ruby Sapphire, Amber Steel, and Amethyst Ruby. How are these stacking up compared to what you maybe expected people were going to bring?
Yeah, so I think most people would have put these three on their top 3 list, but in what order was the question? And that was actually a very important question. Ruby Sapphire as the most played deck definitely was not on my bingo card. If you had asked me yesterday, I would have said Amber Steel, Ruby Amethyst, Ruby Sapphire, but it looks like Ruby Sapphire has come out on top, which is particularly interesting because a lot of people expected Amber Steel to be highly represented, and it's looked at in the current metagame that Ruby Sapphire has a good matchup into Amber Steel. That is contextual. It does depend on the build of Amber Steel, and I think as a result, we're going to see some of these Amber Steel builds be leaning more towards the aggressive line. After you get out of the top 3, though, that next 3, that top 6, that's an important story because the next 3 spots are all occupied by Emerald decks.
Yeah, definitely. Emerald, I think, has been a little bit of an underlier running into this tournament. It's not an ink color that I've heard a lot of people talking about, especially after the Ursula's Return metagame, where it was just run over by Bucky. As soon as Bucky got the errata, I think a lot of people just sort of dropped it. I haven't play tested with it a lot, but there's quite a few players here this weekend, some top players that have made day 2s at other DLCs as well that seem to be on some Emerald sauce. So I think Emerald just generally is going to have a decent matchup into Amber Steel as well. I think Amber Steel is one of those decks that it's the deck to beat, right? That's the reason that, or that's the thing that I've heard a lot of players say, which is why I think we see Ruby Sapphire taking the lead here. It's the deck that can beat Amber Steel pretty easily, or well, not pretty easily, but it's favored, I guess, into Amber Steel. So I'm eager to see what's happening here with this Emerald. We also see Amber Amethyst, Sapphire Steel, and Amethyst Steel. Amber Amethyst and Amethyst Steel specifically I want to highlight because those are 2 decks that lean a little bit more aggressive. Normally the Amethyst deck is hyper aggressive, then Amethyst Steel can be a little bit aggressive mid-range bounce thing going on. You know, that's roughly 8% of the field right now, and we're not even talking about any of the more aggressive versions of Amber Steel or Amethyst Ruby. You know, that might come into play here, especially seeing Ruby Sapphire being at the top. That's typically a very greedy control deck.
For sure. You know, with Amethyst Steel, I usually looked at it as more of a derivative of Amethyst Ruby that had more aggressive lines. I would say with the addition of the Flynn package into Ruby Amethyst, Amethyst Steel kind of lost that edge it had over its counterpart in Ruby Amethyst because Ruby Amethyst was able to shore up its ability to be more of a linear aggressive deck and have that better edge into Ruby Sapphire. And that's really going to be the story of this metagame, I think, in day 1, is you're going to see decks trying to leverage the more aggressive linear game plan into our deck to beat, which is Ruby Sapphire, and Ruby Sapphire kind of being the deck, the mid-range to control deck that can edge out most of these decks in the mid to late game. You know, Amber Steel kind of being the exception, where Amber Steel is a deck that is both aggressive but also has a good ability to transition to the mid to late game due to its ability to utilize a whole new world. And of course, we have some very interesting cards out of the new set like Pete that turn off critical cards both in Ruby Amethyst and Ruby Sapphire.
Yeah, there's a lot of new cards from Shimmering Skies that I'm excited to see this weekend, and so I think we've talked enough about the metagame. People have a good idea of maybe what they need to bring or beat today, so I think it's about time that we head into this match 1 of round 2 for this weekend.
All right, so getting down to the table here, looks like we have Zan up against Alan. I do believe it will be Emerald Steel versus a Ruby Amethyst. The Ruby Amethyst list in particular by Alan is very interesting as it is opted to have some Olafs in at the 1-drop slot, so that is a 1/3. You know, could be looked at as categorically worse than its counterparts in the form of Churnabox Followers or Magic Broom. But what it does offer you is it offers you the ability to get a 1-drop onto the field that cannot be removed as easily by things like Let the Storm Rage On. So a bit stronger versus those steel decks, which Alan has lined up against right now. Critically as well, Alan is not including the new library. It's just playing the Queen's Castle. Olaf is a character that is significantly worse when you have library in the deck. So that's, oh, sorry, we actually see a, looks like
Ruby
Alan is going to
Sapphire.
be on Ruby Sapphire. So it looks like our deck lists were incorrect. So pardon me there. It looks like we have Ruby Sapphire here versus Zan on the Emerald Steel.
Yeah, that could change things up a little bit. Like I said, there's been a Emerald has become more popular, I believe, in some of these matchups going into this weekend. So I'm excited to see what Zan has brought. It looks like we're playing Emerald Steel. I hear the matchup isn't great into something like Ruby Sapphire here. And unfortunately, Zan does not have a 1-drop to play. We're just going to ink a card and then pass on to Alan.
So we do see a new card here out of Alan in the form of Tipo. This is sort of what used to be 1 jump ahead. Sometimes these lists play both 1 jump ahead and Tipo, but Tipo allows you to ink a card from hand, which is a little bit worse in some scenarios than 1 jump ahead because it does give you card disadvantage. But this Ruby Sapphire list is just all about getting ahead on ink and getting ahead into that mid to late game core can become the control deck and play things like Tamatoa, Lucky Dime, and run away with the game.
I'm very excited to see this card that was played by Zan this past turn morph because I think better than most decks in the format, actually, Emerald Steel has the ability to just play some cards that have to be taken care of, right? We see Beast Tragic Hero on screen right now. That is a potential shift option this next turn for Zan. Going into 3 ink, there also could potentially be a Robin Hood if Zan is playing any Robin Hood Champion of Sherwoods as well. Or even if he didn't have the turn 1 Diablo, maybe you're looking to shift to Diablo this turn as well. Morph just sort of represents multiple different cards that could be played that Alan has to think about and play around. Now, of course, as you mentioned, the Ruby Sapphire deck list, it's not doing a lot early in the game, so there's probably not a lot for Alan to play around this necessarily, but we do see Zan inking a morph, and it looks like we are going to play, I see an Ursula Deceiver or a Beast Tragic Hero, Ursula Deceiver of All or Beast Tragic Hero in Zan's hand, so might be a Prince John as well that could come in on 3, a lot of options from Zan. If knowing that we have the Prince John here, it could be more of a discard version of Emerald Steel, so eager to see what happens there, but we do shift this Beast Tragic Hero, which is, this is going to be a pretty big play for Zan right now. We do have the Ice Block in play for Alan, so there are a couple ways that Alan could potentially get rid of the Beast, but as long as the Beast stays there and it stays undamaged, he's going to draw a card at the beginning of Zan's turn.
Yeah, I do believe that Alan has had a pretty strong start here. If Alan has access to the Hero and Flaversham off the back of this, has been able to ramp and get items onto the board, the Maui is a good answer to that Beast Tragic Hero, like you mentioned, was going to threaten to draw a card. But Alan doesn't look like he has access to much off the back of this, doesn't have access to the Hero right now, doesn't have access to that draw engine, which could be a little bit scary going into the following turns by Zan.
It definitely is scary not having cards in hand. That, of course, is a very valuable resource for your game plan, but it does also kind of turn off some of these cards in Zan's hand.
Absolutely
I see 2
does.
Prince Johns in those hand, and Prince John draws you cards when your opponent has to discard cards. But when your opponent doesn't have any cards in hand, he's not getting a lot of value. So instead, we see Zan playing this Ursula Deceiver of All that will be able to sing songs that cost 3 or less twice, essentially, if Zan has them to play.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct with that Maui sort of dominating the field and there being no cards in hand for Alan does just turn off a lot of Zan's game plan here.
Especially because right now Zan, he was banking on the Beast Tragic Hero surviving so that was going to be the initial card draw. These Prince Johns are turned off. Zan doesn't have very many ways to draw cards right now. There's no Let the Storm Rage On that he has that he can sing with Ursula either. He is going to play this Hypnotize that is going to allow Alan, or force Alan to discard a card and then let Zan draw a card. Zan is then going to ink a Diablo, 2 Prince Johns in hand, and then another steel card a Pete. Okay, so this Pete may be important as the game goes along, potentially stopping something like a Be Prepared if Alan is playing those as well.
Yep, looks like we do see a 3-cost Sisu come down in combination with the Ice Block to get rid of that Ursula. Great play here from Alan. And I think you're right. In the context of Prince John re-entering some of these Emerald lists, being able to sort of ink your entire hand and get cards out of your hand early in the game can stop that additional card draw engine out of these Emerald decks.
Unfortunately, neither of these players have found a great solution to build their hands back up, so both are just sort of playing off of the top of the deck. We saw Zan draw a Hidden Cove there, deciding just to ink it, playing the Prince John, and then playing the Pete so that Alan can't play any songs on his turn. But of course, Alan only has the 1 card in hand with the evasive Sisu, Daring Visitor. not going to do much right now because Prince John has Ward. So normally you would be able to choose Prince John only having 1 strength, Sisu being able to banish a character with 1 strength or less, but because Prince John has Ward and can't be chosen by an opponent, Prince John is going to stay safe, can potentially quest for 2 lore, which is pretty good, but right now Alan's actually leading in lore, which I don't think is where you want to be against Ruby Sapphire.
Very interesting. So Alan has made the choice to keep that Sisu in hand, did have the option to ink it with the Fishbone Quill or potentially play it out. Leaving that in hand, that is the threat of that being discarded and Zan drawing an additional card off of the Prince John here. So we do see double Prince John come out here for Zan, and it's going to be an Ursula to follow it back up. So no discard, which kind of does potentially reward Alan here with keeping that Sisu in hand.
Yes, when you see Alan just draw another Tipo, Tipo's not going to be able to do much, especially with no other card in hand, but it is a character on board. Can potentially sing 1 jump ahead or another 2-cost song there if available.
Yeah, so I do think that the Sisu was in hand, actually.
okay,
It was just
sorry.
kind of off to the side there, yeah.
But still deciding to play the Sisu just down. I mean, having an evasive character on board, Zan's not going to be able to interact with it in any way. That's at least 1 lore from that Sisu that Alan can quest with every turn without really being punished. I say that. Here comes the Diablo right after that. An evasive character. Now, if Zan can get this Diablo exerted at any point, then every time Alan draws a card, Diablo will also draw Zan a card, and maybe this is what Zan needs to sort of get rolling on this game.
Yeah, we gotta talk about how much Alan got rewarded for keeping that Sisu in hand and not inking it to the Fishbone Quill, and also not just playing it out onto the board. Was able to follow up on the next turn with the Ice Block plus Sisu onto that Ursula, denying a lot of value out of Zan. So critical play here from Alan as the Diablo gets developed onto the board. Off the back of that, we see another How Far I'll Go. Just a fantastic card in these lists. Looks like he's going to keep the Be Prepared in hand and ink the other.
And this is a little interesting of a scenario just because Alan has that Be Prepared in hand now, but I mean, now that we're getting rid of the Maui, there's not a lot that Alan is representing on board in regards to lore. Of course, like we mentioned, you have the Sisu that can quest for evasive. If Zan is challenging with his Diablo, maybe rather than singing or questing, that's probably good for you. But it's not a terrible board to wipe, getting rid of those Prince Johns, just because they have so much lore. I was going to talk about the Maui that has been sitting there for so long, basically making it so that Zan can't exert those Prince Johns at all without being punished for that, because Maui only had 3 damage on him, so of course the Prince John would not banish that. But it does look like we are going to sing Let the Storm Rage On onto the Sisu, banishing that Sisu and letting Zan draw a card with the Prince John. We're drawing into a sudden chill,
does find the
forcing
discard
to
spell.
discard the Be Prepared.
Yeah, and that's an absolute disaster because it's going to be a double draw off the back of that. That's what I was thinking as we kept that Be Prepared in hand. It was just any discard spell would just almost threatens to lose the game here because Zan draws 2 more cards. You, of course, lose that card in your hand, which you're saving for sort of disaster scenario. I think on the follow-up turn, the Be Prepared was sort of the insurance. So really tough scenario Alan enters here.
And we see just how powerful those Prince Johns can be, and why we talked about how important it was for them to be turned off, because as soon as Alan kept a card in hand and Zan finally found a way to gain value off of those Prince Johns, now Zan has a couple cards in hand. We see another Let the Storm Rage On that could potentially be sung by Prince John or Diablo or Pete next turn, any of these characters, and then start drawing extra cards off of that, potentially finding more discard cards. There's also an Anna, I forget the sub-name of what she does, but she's basically an uninkable 3-cost character that gives you a couple options. One of those options is forcing your opponent to discard a card. So if we see that Anna being played again, you can pay an extra cost to have her do that, and then we can gain even more value off of these Prince Johns. But we've sort of flipped the book here, and now Zan has the bigger, more aggressive board, being able to quest all the way out. Alan, of course, still can potentially draw stuff like Sisu, Big Sisu, or Be Prepared to get his way out of this scenario, but instead we see him draw the Popsicle.
Yeah, absolutely have to. Probably also looking for a Flavershim just to dig through more of the deck, ink more cards. Really, we need to draw the Sisu as soon as possible, or draw the Be Prepared on a turn where it's not being blanked by Pete. But, prior to that, did draw the actual, one of the worst cards of the deck to draw, which was Maleficent, Monstrous Dragon, while on 8 ink, so I had to go ahead and ink that card. And I think at this stage, with 2 Prince Johns sitting on the field, there's just no way you can pass over back to Zan with the card in hand, because there's just so many There's just a threat of drawing so many cards for Zan if he does find that discard spell. With so many cards in hand as well, he's likely to have it.
Yeah, I mean, and we see just out of hand this is getting for Zan. But just a couple turns ago, he didn't have any cards in hand. Now he has a stack of cards in hand, basically everything he needs. And it does look like Alan is just going to scoop, knowing that drew the T-Po's not going to help us at all in this scenario. We don't have any other way to continue to draw cards. And like you said, really needed something like a Flaversham or a Be Prepared or Sisu to sort of get back into that game.
Yeah, it was really interesting because it felt like Alan was very ahead at one point in that game, was ahead on lore, was ahead on board, was, of course, ahead on ink. And we saw that completely turn as Zan was able to find the discard card and draw those 2 cards off of our Prince John.
Yeah, I think those Prince Johns really put in the work that game, letting Zan get back in. And unfortunately, Alan just wasn't able to find some of the removal that he needed to because, I don't know about you, but when I'm against Ruby Sapphire deck, like, you want to be the one ahead those first couple turns. Anytime I'm playing against Ruby Sapphire, I'm trying to finish the game before we can get to their late game. So kind of an interesting game there where things were turned around a little bit.
Absolutely.
So with that, I think we can move on to game 2 and see who can take that one.
All right, so it looks like we're going to be sculpting our hands here to start off. Wondering what Alan is looking for in the opening hand. Does look like he's potentially keeping the Maui plus the Fishbone Quill. So I actually see Flaversham plus the Fishbone Quill being kept here.
Yeah, and we're looking at, when we look at Zan's hand, I see an Ursula Deceiver, sudden chill in there. I think you definitely want to keep that Ursula Deceiver. Could potentially stop something like a 1 jump ahead if Alan is able to find a T-Po or want to play it. I believe Alan went first last game, so if Zan gets to go first this game, you could play that Ursula Deceiver before Alan can actually play something like a 1 jump ahead and get that out, which is usually crucial for these Ruby Sapphire lists, just to get that ramp so you can hit that Flaversham. Seeing how strong this discard package can be with Emerald, and Sapphire's already a deck that can get pretty low in their hand size, especially early in the game, because of you trying to ramp so quickly. If you don't have something like a Hiram to come back from, start building that back up, even discarding 1 or 2 cards as the Emerald player can be enough to miss an ink or set them just far enough behind for you to take advantage of that.
Yeah, it is so critical for these Ruby Sapphire decks to accelerate from that 2 ink to that 4 ink. Most of its power plays in the early game do exist at 4 ink, and often the deck lists omit cards that cost 3 because of that, because it is able to accelerate from 2 to 4 so reliably now that T-Po has entered the deck. So usually these decks have a combination of both T-Po and 1 jump ahead, but often if they do cut one of them, I see them, for the most part, relying on the T-Po instead of the 1 jump in this new metagame.
Definitely. I think that is the case here. So these, looks like both players are just shuffling up their deck after this altar, and we can get a good look at their hand. I think Zan is probably just looking for something like a turn 1 Diablo, hopefully shift Diablo. Alan looking to probably Popsicle, draw an extra card, just get rid of, or not get rid of, but sort of undo any of the discard that might be coming from Zan as well. I do see the Diablo there at the very front of Zan's hand.
Yep, and I don't believe I see the shift Diablo in hand quite yet, but it could have been in the back there.
We're going to start by inking a Strength, playing the Diablo, getting a good look at Alan's hand, seeing what he's working with here.
Okay, so the double Fishbone Quill to how far I'll go, and he does have that Popsicle like you mentioned with the Hiram. So no turn 2 acceleration, which is very, very important here. We talked about that as we led into this match. It's going to significantly slow down Alan's game plan, as it's not going to be able to accelerate into that Hiram Flaversham on turn 3. He's going to have to wait all the way to turn 4, barring a turn 2 acceleration off the top here.
And although we don't have any shift Diablos on Zan's side of the board, we do still have some pretty strong plays. We have the Ursula Deceiver. We also have the Sudden Chill. So we have a couple ways to get cards out of Alan's hand. As you mentioned, there weren't very many great ramp options. There were 2 Fishbone Quills in there, but that's honestly the last ramp option you want to see going into a deck like this, especially one where Zan has the ability to discard cards. We do see the Prince John there as well, so that Zan might be waiting a turn to use and get a little bit of value out of there.
Yeah, I do like the Fishbone Quill in this matchup now that they have opted to include the Prince Johns. But that being said, I still find that the turn 2 acceleration is critical to this deck sort of functioning as you would like it to.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, or well, for Alan's deck, I think it is critical for them to get to 7 or 8 ink just so that you can play those Be Prepared so those Sisus off the top when you need to. So
Yeah, Be Prepared honestly feels like a pretty risky card nowadays. So you see, Zan's going to take the How Far I'll Go. I believe does have the Pete in hand, but Be Prepared not as reliable as it used to be. It almost feels like you want to be accelerating into that big 8-cost Sisu into these Emerald decks. It just seems like a much better card because you can't get blanked by Pete. You see expert players like Zan utilizing Pete in order to block Be Prepared on those critical turns.
yeah, Pete has made a big difference in this metagame for Shimmering Skies. I believe Alan's probably happy to see that there's no Diablo shift because there was no early interaction there either. We saw a couple Sisus from Alan last game, so would have a little bit of a difficult time dealing with this Diablo. I don't think there was any brawls in there either, but we do have the option this turn to play this Prince John and then seeing a sudden chill of drawing a card. We'll see if that is the line that Zan decides to take. Yep, we see that. Let's look and see what Alan decides to discard here.
Yep, bringing me back to an earlier metagame in which this was a very popular line by Emerald decks.
So I'm going to go ahead and quest with this Diablo, knowing that I think Alan's only on 3 ink or 2 ink right now, so no Mauis or anything to come in to punish for any of these exerted characters.
Does look like a Tamatoa off the top. Surely we'll be seeing our Fishbone Quill here come down. Needs to accelerate as fast as possible. Does have access to the Hero and Flaversham, which we saw in the opening hand, so he's going to be able to add some additional card draw there. But, it always comes at the cost of potentially turning on part of Zan's game plan, which is making you discard cards and drawing additional cards off of the Prince John. The Prince John dynamic is always such an interesting one to navigate because it incentivizes you to have less cards in hand, but, cards, decks like Ruby Sapphire want to draw a lot of cards and have many cards in hand. So it's like a tough line to navigate, I find.
Yeah, you're definitely right. It's a little bit difficult for these players to navigate. We did get a pretty good draw for Zan there, drawing the Sudden Chill. Before, we didn't really have a 4-drop to play. There was a Let the Storm Rage on, but there were no characters for Alan on Alan's side of the board to really make use of that. And then, of course, we couldn't play the Beast either. But we found the Sudden Chill, forcing Alan to discard a card and draw another card off of the Prince John. I believe we have another 1-drop Diablo in hand. Other than that, I think there's a Hidden Cove. So not great options on this board state, to be honest. You want something that you can hit with that Let the Storm Rage on Zan to just continue to draw cards. But I imagine we'll be inking and preparing for Beast on the next turn. The question is just, what are we inking? What are we playing?
Yeah, we do know Alan is relying on that Hero on the following turn to draw back up and sort of get back into this game, and that is part of the critical engine of Ruby Sapphire in this early to mid game. So the Cove does come down. Looks like we're going to move as well.
I do like this play of the Cove because it does turn off some of the Ruby removal, right?
We've
talked about this 8-cost Sisu that'll banish all opposing characters with 2 or less strength. So if you can get a couple of these characters onto the Hidden Cove that already only have 2 strength, that's just one less thing that gets banished. Or even like this Beast Tragic Hero that I imagine we're going to see played next turn. If you can get that into the Cove eventually, that gets rid of a Medusa option if there's one of those.
Yeah, I also kind of felt like Zan didn't really have too many other plays. So Zan, I think, was weighing up, doesn't have an Inkable in hand. You do have the option to let Storm Rage on his own character, but doesn't have an Inkable, needs to find an Inkable to play this turn 5 Tragic Beast, but does find it in the form of Sudden Chill, which might be one of the best ones because can send that to draw another card. Does still need to find the Inkable off of this Sudden Chill in order to play that Beast Tragic Hero, which will be a lot of pressure, right? We're making Alan discard cards. We're drawing cards. Doesn't find the Inkable, but does find the Diablo. I think that's okay in this situation.
Yeah, we can discard this other Storm Rage on to shift the Diablo if we would like to onto the other Diablo. I believe the Diablo is the one that's at this Cove too. So again, now outside of CC range, does look like we're going to do that. Go ahead and quest with both of these.
Yeah. Very interesting scenario to where it seemed like Zan wanted to find the Inkable off the top, but finds an even better card in the form of the Diablo because had this Let the Storm Rage on, which was really not doing much in the hand, but was a perfect card to discard in order to shift that Diablo and put Alan in sort of one of the toughest positions you can be in Lorcana, which is facing a Diablo without a piece of removal, and does effectively turn off the Hero and Flaversham as well because the Diablo would trigger if Alan went to draw with that package.
Yeah, that's the very difficult thing about Diablo here is that Hiram is one of the better draw engines in this game, drawing you 2 cards when he exerts and you banish one of your items. But now that Diablo's exerted, every time Alan draws a card, Zan's going to get to draw another, which really is not what you want. It might be what you have to do here, though. We do see Alan deciding to use that Fishbone Quill, add something to his Inkwell. Only 2 cards left in hand, but we're going to banish the Fishbone Quill, draw 2 more to keep a decent hand size. I mean, 4 isn't nothing against this deck. We've already seen 3 Sudden Chills as well, or that Ursula Deceiver has discarded, I think, 4 cards over the course of this game.
Yeah, so I believe Alan is looking to find a Be Prepared here, just because the Sisu is not as good of an out because of that Cove, right? So wants to find the Be Prep.
Okay, we're going to play a Cusco. This is a brand new card in Shimmering Skies. When you play Cusco, you can choose a location card and put it into the opponent's Inkwell, or I think it's an opponent's Inkwell, location or item card. So, and it is going to get rid of the Hidden Cove, sort of turns on this Sisu again.
Yep. So you see the power and the modality of cards like this. Like a Cusco is a card I think a lot of people associate with putting opposing Lucky Dimes into the Inkwell, right? Turning off win conditions. But you see it have its other use case just being absolutely critical here because it has access to the Ace Cost Sisu, but was getting blanked by that Cove.
I will say, Zan has been in a pretty decent spot for the majority of this game, but he's only been able to get up to about 8 lore. He does have a pretty decent hand size. We're going to see the Hypnotize being played, forcing Alan to discard one of those cards. Of course, he's not going to discard the Sisu that I believe was in hand. That's going to let Zan draw another card. Zan has plenty of options here, so depending on how much Zan wants to play into a potential Sisu or Be Prepared off the top this next turn, he'll still have plenty of cards in hand that he can play out, like this Morph. Morph could shift into a Tinkerbell. There's also a Muses that's in play as well. If we play this Muses and manage to sing a song, we could potentially bounce the Hiram Flabbersham back to Alan's hand. That would force him to have to use 4 ink to replay it if he ever gets an item, like
or
a
make him
Popsicle.
discard it, right? So you can bounce it back to hand, then play your discard, and then you get rid of the sort of the draw engine from Alan. Zan really spoiled for choice with cards in hand right now. That being said, the 8-cost Sisu, which I believe is the last card left in hand, would be a decent swing for Alan in the form of a 3-for-1. I do think Zan has enough cards in hand to deploy off the back of it, so would still be able to come back into this game. But this Sisu is going to be a huge board swing for Alan.
With only 2 ink left, I think Zan's trying to figure out right now if he wants to play that Morph that's in hand, because he had a Beast Tragic Hero and a Tinkerbell as well. You could play the Morph this turn, set up for a shift on the next turn, but then of course, if that Sisu's available, looking through that discard to see how many has gone already, then that Morph gets banished and sort of ruins that play, and you're sort of not potentially wasting a card, but definitely don't want to get it banished. Instead, we're going to decide to ink it.
I believe Alan only has access to 7 inks, so did have to find the inkable. Inks the Tamatoa and is going to play the Sisu here. So not finding an inkable there would have been absolutely devastating.
And this could be the biggest swing for Alan here, because now Zan's entire board is banished. Zan has plenty of cards he can play next turn, but when we look at Alan's board, he has this Hiram. He also has the Cusco that's questing for 2 lore every turn, and the Sisu that's questing for 3. All of these characters are going to be a little difficult for Zan to get rid of. Like we mentioned before, he could potentially bounce this Hiram with a Muses. If he can damage any of these characters, I do see that Anna in play as well. So we're going to see the Tinkerbell coming down, dealing 1 damage to everything that can set up for a future Anna being played. You play Anna, you can pay an extra 2 ink and then banish just a damaged character. So it's a really efficient way of getting rid of a character that already has a little bit of damage on them. But Zan only having 7 ink, being able to ink 1 card this turn, can only play this Tinkerbell. And this could be where the Ruby Sapphire deck decides to shine. In this late game, we get rid of the opponent's board, we start drawing some of our removal options to keep this one character that Zan is playing out of the way, then Alan can start to take control of this game and come back.
Yeah, I actually feel like this is a really important top deck for Alan, but Alan is ahead due to the context of Zan's head, or Alan was ahead on board. I actually think that Zan is in the driver's seat right now, especially is going to be able to get rid of that big Sisu on the next turn, most likely. And just has access to so many cards in hand that can deploy behind this 3-for-1 that Sisu was able to do on the board. And I think that Zan's kind of representing the ability to win this game right now. That being said, Alan with the big Sisu, with the Harem, I think if he had top deck something like an item, could have been in a good spot. But Zan just drew so many cards off of that Prince John.
Yeah, especially because Alan just didn't have a great draw this turn. We can, like you said, deploy a couple of these really strong and powerful cards. We have the Beast Tragic Hero, Ursula Deceiver, which was drawn. Could use the Ana to get rid of some characters. If we wanted to, we could challenge one of Alan's characters with Tinkerbell, do some damage there as well. But there's definitely a lot of options in Zan's head right now, or in Zan's hand right now, for how he wants to go about the rest of the game.
Yep, and Zan is, of course, at 12 lore as well, so very close to, ultimately getting to 20. So gets rid of this big Sisu, deploys a threat or two. Like, Alan needs to find something like another board clear, maybe another big Sisu, but the big Sisu wouldn't even hit the Tinkerbell. So, of course, we're going to see that new card in the form of Ana is going to go ahead and get rid of...
It's like the Sisu is what he was pointing at.
Okay. Yeah, for a second I thought he pointed at the Kuzco. No, he's going to attack the Kuzco. Trigger that Tinkerbell, put 2 extra damage counters onto our Flaversham here.
Deciding to leave the Flaversham in play over anything else. I think trying to reduce the lore on board and sort of forcing Alan to draw an item card to sort of get anything rolling with Hiram in this scenario. Like you said, just deploying a couple threats, playing the Ana, choosing to play Hypnotize to draw a card. Or sorry, play the Pete here.
That's a great Pete, by the way. Is taking away sort of the out that Alan has here with that Pete.
And it looks like, is that a one jump ahead that just got drawn? Or is it a Vision of the Future, maybe?
Vision of the Future would be a lot better.
It looks like an action, which, of course, this Pete turns off. So there's not much Alan can do this turn, unfortunately, which is definitely not a position you want to be in, just sort of passing your turn on to Zan, being ahead on lore, being ahead in board, being ahead in hand as well.
Yeah, we have seen these Ruby Sapphire lists switch over to Vision of the Future instead of what used to be Develop Your Brain. Sometimes they play both, but Vision of the Future just being a better rate, looking at the 5 cards, where, 2 Develop Your Brains would have been just looking at 4. So it's been an interesting update to the Ruby Sapphire deck. But, like I mentioned, Zan just being so far ahead on card advantage, despite getting 3-for-1 by the big Sisu, is able to come back and is still clearly in the driver's seat here.
And it looks like Alan just has to pass on this turn, and Zan can continue to build up the board as much as he wants to and just kind of force Alan to have the play. We have Pete and Tinkerbell, having more than 2 strength. The Sisus aren't very helpful, as you mentioned. The Be Prepared is kind of the only thing that we're trying to draw off the top
How much do you develop into this board, right? Because you're winning the game by so much. How much more do you develop onto the board? With the risk of running into a Be Prepared. Because right now you're representing game, right?
Yeah.
Like, Alan needs to find something. How much more of your hand are you deploying on this board? Because Alan's only way out already, it kind of feels like a Be Prepared, kind of feels like a big Sisu. So, sort of, what are your thoughts as Zan?
When even the big Sisu isn't going to do so much, and we have so many powerful cards in Zan's hand that the Hiram Flaversham's not going to get rid of anything. I think other than just top decking Be Prepared, this next series thing that Alan can top deck is maybe a Popsicle, so you can start digging into stuff and building back a board. I think you have to really weigh on how much you play into something like a Be Prepared.
There we go.
Let's say if a Be Prepared is played, can you still build with what you have in hand? So I really like this play from Zan, playing the Diablo, not risking too much, knowing that, okay, if Alan finds the draw, then we're gonna have 3 more characters that we can play right after that. And if that was a Vision in Alan's hand as well, that's going to be a great card for this scenario specifically, being able to dig 5 cards deep into his deck and potentially finding the out. We do see Amount of Medusa being played instead to banish the Ana.
Yep, and that will be game. So 2-0 to Zan, which is very important in tournaments like this when you get to these almost 2,000 player caps and we have the cut to top 64 on day 2. I cannot stress how important it is to be 2-0ing your matches, especially in the early rounds when you can. It is just critical for getting enough points to end up making day 2.
Definitely, and we saw because both players had 7 points already that they had 2-0'd their previous match. It only takes about 4 or 5 rounds of 2-0ing before you're basically guaranteed into day 2, but that's a lot easier said than done in the 2-game format, going into a blind match. So great work by both players getting this far. They still have plenty of rounds to go. I believe there's 7 more rounds after this for both players to potentially make their way into day 2.
Yep, and Zan, one of our favored players of the tournament, starting out very strong with 2 2-0s and playing a deck that is not in the top 3, so maybe playing a little bit of a spicy deck. Emerald Steel, a deck that was very famous in previous metagames, but it's fallen off quite a bit, and we can see how powerful it still is with the addition of the new cards in our most recent set, and just going back to its old Prince John discard package.
Yep. So with that being said, we're going to go to a quick break. Don't go anywhere, though, because we're going to be right back with another match from round 2 for Disney Lorcana Challenge here in Las Vegas.
Welcome back to the booth here at the Disney Lorcana Challenge in Las Vegas. I am Brendan, joined by Brandon once again, and we're heading to our second match of round 2, and it's going to be an exciting one. I believe we have Emerald Amethyst versus Amber Steel. You're a bit of an Amber Steel player yourself.
Yes.
How do you feel like this deck is looking into this metagame? Because, of course, we got to see the metagame breakdown when we were previously on. How do you feel like it looks into this metagame, but also in particular into Amethyst Emerald?
I think Amber Steel is extremely powerful this set, if we're being honest. We saw just how powerful a card like Pete was last game, but we also have other cards like Prince Naveen that can sing a song without actually having to sing it, essentially. As soon as you play Prince Naveen, you can play a song out of your hand. He's also a Singer 6. There's a couple popular versions of Amber Steel going around using Lantern, but there's, of course, many variations of Amber Steel being played. I think it's definitely one of the better decks to be playing this weekend and in this meta, and that's just been proven time and time again, especially with the whole new world package and all of that we've seen, honestly, for the past multiple sets. It's been a great deck since day one, especially into this matchup of Amethyst Emerald. It honestly does pretty good. If the Amethyst Emerald player can land some Ursula Deceivers and sort of strip some of those songs out of your hand, I think they're in a good spot, and Amethyst does have a pretty good ability to bounce characters back and forth out of hand to sort of keep them safe. So I think if those players can do a good job of doing that, sort of force the Amber Steel player to get as little value out of the songs as possible, then this isn't like the game's over because you're into Steel Song, but it's definitely going to be a little bit of a challenge if that's the version of the deck that's even being run.
Yeah, I do think it is a hard matchup. Amber Steel is a particularly interesting deck because I feel like it is so dynamic in this metagame. You see it being built in so many different ways. I know you mentioned the Lantern, but just archetypically, it can be built in a much more aggressive-oriented way or a more mid-range oriented way. And I feel like if you look out at the general field, you'll find there's not one consensus of what is and what is not the right build.
Yeah, definitely. It's like I said, there's been multiple versions that have been strong since set 1, and it sort of does. It's almost like a spectrum of how far on the aggro side do you want to go? Do you want to play the Piglets? Do you want to play the Daisy Ducks? And how far on the mid-range control side do you want to go? How many of those Cinderella Stouthearteds do you want to play? How many Tinkerbells? So it definitely is going to depend, I think, especially going into this weekend, knowing that Ruby Sapphire was going to be a pretty popular deck and one that you're probably going to run into a lot. I can see a lot of people leaning towards the aggressive version of the deck, so I'm eager to see what version of the deck we have here for this round.
Yep, well, let's get down to our round and get into our match. This Amethyst Emerald is particularly interesting. In my opinion, it is just like the quintessential tempo deck of Lorcana. It's super interesting. It looks to get on the board fast. It's both aggressive, but then has some mid-range and controlling elements. In particular, I love the Lyle Tiberius card, a card that is I found to be very powerful in previous metagames. Can just be so strong into some of those other mid-range matchups, particularly into Ruby Amethyst, in which I think this deck shines. I think it's very good.
Tempo is definitely a word that I think of for Amethyst Emerald, and we do see a Daisy Duck being played by Crystal here. Brand new card from Shimmering Skies, a 1/4 with 2 lore, which is a lot of stats for a 1-drop character. That's why it's uninkable. But every time you quest with Daisy, your opponent looks at the top card of their deck, and then if it's a character card, they can draw that card. If it's not, then it goes to the bottom. We see Morgan drawing a Cursed Merfolk off of the Daisy Duck questing. And one thing I wanted to talk about, one of the archetypes that Amethyst Emerald usually plays really well into is a aggressive deck, right? A lot of those hyper aggro decks are decks that run pretty low to the ground. Their ability to play foxes, bounce characters just with the Madame Mim and Merlin package in general, gives them a little bit of favor into those matchups, being able to trade pretty efficiently. So if Crystal is leaning more into this aggressive strategy of Amber Steel, especially depending on how many songs we end up seeing, Morgan might have a better shot into this Amber Steel matchup in general.
Well, speaking of drawing characters, Mo has access to actually 52 characters in the deck right now, so very likely to hit a character off of that Daisy Duck trigger. But that trigger, while it's definitely a downside, it can be mitigated by this Amber Steel deck playing things like a Whole New World where that card advantage doesn't really matter as much.
Right, and that's why I really like this Daisy Duck, especially if you're going to go the aggressive route, because if you are playing those Whole New Worlds, it's like you said, it doesn't matter how many cards my opponent has in hand, or I'm going to force them to discard them and draw 7, which Crystal may need to find that card pretty soon. I think we only have 1 or 2 cards in hand already, but we are playing pretty aggressively. We have that Mr. Smee in play that can quest for 2 lore. We'll take a damage every single time that it quests without a captain being in play. I expect there's a probably Pooh Pirate captain sitting in the deck somewhere, so if that's in play, we'll stop taking the damage. But otherwise, gonna going to damage itself. The Captain Hook here, I think, is an interesting play as well. It'll be able to trade with an Ursula Deceiver or this Clarabelle that's being played. We do see the Madame Fox being played and bouncing that Deceiver, though.
Yep, and getting rid of that critical 2 quester with a 1/4. The 1/4 stat line is just so impressive for a 1-drop, making it so very, very resistant to the most of the removal that actually exists in Lorcana, which is usually doing 2 damage or 3. It's one of the reasons why this is probably one of the most hyped cards, I think, from the most recent set. People looked at this card and they're like, okay, aggro is back on the menu.
Definitely. We do see Crystal drawing a Pete here, which we talked about how great this card was in the previous matchup. I actually don't know that it's particularly great in this matchup because Emerald Amethyst typically doesn't run a lot of songs, and most of the songs that they run are sort of just benefiting themselves, things like Friends on the Other Side. You'll see the occasional Bippity Boppity Boo. We did see a You're Welcome being inked by Mo earlier in the game, but it looks like we have a Donald Duck Musketeer in hand as well. That could be good. It's a bodyguard that what gives another character a lore for that turn when it's played. So if we can play this Musketeer, it's going to give Mr. Smee an extra lore to quest for 3 this turn. But not only that, it's going to protect this Mr. Smee from something maybe like another Fox that could be in hand to bounce the Clarabelle. And of course, the Clarabelle is not going to have enough strength on her own to get through this Donald, allowing the Smee to gain even more lore over the course of a couple turns.
What's so interesting about Pete and why I think Pete is so strong is like it is absolutely backbreaking for some of these Ruby Amethyst or Ruby Sapphire decks that rely on be prepared to clear the board. But when you get into a matchup like Amethyst Emerald, where it might not be as good, and I do think that you're correct that it's not, because this deck has 10 songs in it. Like you said, they're not board clears. They're mostly card advantage songs. You know what you can do as Pete? You can just ink it. It's an inkable card. It's one of the most powerful cards in the current metagame, and it adversely affects 2 of the most popular decks in the metagame. But it's also inkable. It's not like it's an uninkable tech card.
Yeah, one of the some of the strongest cards in the game are that strong just because they're inkable, right? If you're already a powerful card, but you also have the option of using it as ink, that's sort of a thing that I find players not really recognizing very much. Is you obviously have your inkable and uninkable cards in regards to, well, if I have an inkable card in my hand, I can't ink it, and so it's stuck there. But it's an extra option that you have for these cards. So if you can play a really powerful card that you can also ink in the matchups that it's not useful, I think that's the best spot for some tech cards and just best spot for the most powerful cards in the game as well.
Yep, so we see Lyle Tiberius come down. This is a very interesting card, a card that's made it in and out of the Lorcana metagame over the course of a year now, and it does give Reckless to that Donald Duck. And it also does have a very interesting trigger, is like whenever one of your other characters that is not Lyle Tiberius gets banished, so look at that Merfolk, your opponent loses 1 lore. That is a very strong trigger to be enforcing on your opponent that is playing a aggressive Amber Steel list.
Yeah, and that's why I mentioned earlier that if Crystal is playing a more aggressive Amber Steel version, this Lyle could, well, I didn't mention the Lyle specifically, but it's being run in a lot of Amethyst Emerald decks during this metagame, and it is backbreaking for aggro style decks because their goal is just to get to 20 as fast as possible, usually in the first 7-ish turns of the game before the opponent can bring it back. And one thing that Amethyst Emerald's really good at is keeping their hand full when they find rabbits, finding ways to bounce. We do see it just in time.
And it does hit the 1 card in hand. The Ursula just comes down and does... Oh, sorry, it's not a song.
Oh, so it's
Actually,
not a song.
Yeah,
okay,
so
but that's still a very exciting card to see, to be honest. I don't know that Crystal has 5 ink in her inkwell right now. If she does, I think she only has 5. But just in time's not a card that we've seen since set 1. When you play it, it only costs 3. You can play a 5-cost character for free from your hand. So very fun and very interesting card to see being played today.
Yeah, absolutely. But going back to Lyle is very strong against opposing aggro decks, but also just an absolute house in any sort of mid-range mirror because Lyle sits on the board, and then you at the end of your game, if you've gone through this 20-30 minute mid-range grindy matchup, you're like, wow, Lyle accrued 10 points of lore or something ridiculous like that. Just an absolutely crazy card, and I'm happy to see it come back into the metagame.
One other thing to mention about Lyle is just the stats that he has. Having the 4 willpower on him makes it so that these Petes we mentioned maybe aren't great on Pete's ability playing into Amethyst Emerald, but he is a solid body. Can trade with a lot of things. Can trade with Madame M Snake or a Fox or some of these more mid-range characters that we see Amethyst Emerald playing anyway. But this Lyle, not that you would ever really want to quest with the Lyle anyway because of the strength that he's giving you through his ability. But if it is exerted, Crystal can't banish that Lyle with the Pete.
Yeah, there's some critical breakpoints in Lorcana. The first probably being the disparity between 2 and 3. You know, once you're at 3, you dodge a lot of removal, but once you go from 3 to 4 in particular, you dodge almost all removal. After that, you're looking at something like 6, right? Once you get up to 6, you start getting away from Zeus and some of those bigger removal pieces. And also, a lot of characters do have sort of 5 strength. So that 6 willpower can be super powerful, and that 4 willpower can be super powerful. We also see Elsa come down, this 2/5 evasive rush. This is a newer card that has made it into a lot of Amethyst lists, and it does actually exert chosen character as it comes into play as well. Lyle's looking great.
Lyle's looking really good for this matchup. Crystal not really able to make a dent in her lore total, getting any further along. She's also very low on cards, as she only has that just in time in hand. I haven't seen very many songs either, to be honest with you, from this deck. It looks to be very aggro-centered, and so we may have reached this point where this Amethyst Emerald deck has sort of taken over the game in this mid-game like it's supposed to do, and we mentioned earlier in how strong it is into certain aggro decks as well.
Yep. So Crystal's deck also only has 10 songs in it. So an Amber Steel deck very much more oriented around characters and just that aggressive game plan through a lot of these very, very aggressive one-drops. You know, it has 4 Lilos, 4 Daisy Ducks, and of course we saw Smeeze in combination with the Captains. So a bit of a different take on Amber Steel, but could be absolutely the right call into a metagame that is dominated by the most popular deck being Ruby Sapphire. And this list looks like it would be very powerful in Ruby Sapphire.
And unfortunately, Crystal only drew a Lilo there, and that's not going to be very helpful with this Lyle on the other side of the board. We see Lyle doing some work with the Metagame Snake, trading into one of the exerted Petes, banishing the Pete and the Snake itself. But of course, when the Snake is banished, then Crystal's going to lose a lore going down to 8. And at this point, I think it's just how fast can Morgan build up their own board and get enough lore to get to 20.
Yeah, I mean, critically, Crystal does not have access to a whole new world in the list. So we talk about, just playing 10 songs, but those 10 songs are split between the Bare Necessities, Let the Storm Rage On, and Strength of a Raging Fire.
Yeah, so without a card like Whole New World, it makes it a lot harder for some of these aggro lists to keep the gas. We do see a Tiana. Okay, this is kind of interesting. This is a card we haven't seen since Rise of the Floodborn. When she quests if she's exerted and you have no cards in hand, then your opponent can't play any action cards. And we talked about how impactful that might or might not be into this matchup.
Tiana's an interesting card. When I first saw Tiana, I was like, okay, here is like the sort of lockout deck. Here's how you build it. But there's a reason why Pete is the card that makes it into most lists. The hoops you have to jump through for Tiana are actually pretty intense, with having to have no cards in hand and for her having to be exerted. So it's like you can't her effect does not come into play when she comes down, and you have to go through the additional sort of step of having no cards in hand. And then Pete, 3-cost Inkable, comes down and sort of gets your opponent on a critical turn no matter what. But that being said, Tiana is also a 1/4 with resist 2. Very hard to remove.
Very hard
2 as well.
Very hard to remove, and I think at this point, Tiana's goal is just she has 2 lore. So we're going to play her, and we're going to try to quest and gain as much advantage as we can, because with the Lyle on board, Crystal is losing lore every time one of Mo's characters is being banished. But if you're questing for more than one every turn, you're technically positive. You're getting a little bit closer to 20, just not as fast as you'd like to.
Yeah, I actually think this Tiana is pretty scary just because of how hard it is to remove with that resist 2 and being able to quest for 2, and Crystal already sitting at 13 lore. I'm wondering, okay, so there's the crab. Crab could be super critical here. We see a bibbity boppity boo.
I love this play. Bippity Boppity Boo, we're going to replay the crab, giving something Challenger +3, which I don't think we can banish the Tiana this turn. If we give Elsa Challenger +3, it'll only deal 5 damage. With Tiana having 4 willpower and resist +2, we'll be 1 damage shy. But
So, I don't know if we're shortcutting a little bit. I'm trying to understand. Are we playing the crab and then using the entry trigger to give +3 and then also bouncing with Bibbidi Boppidi?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
The extra Challenger.
So it has a sort of a leaving trigger as well. I believe maybe we're getting Challenger 6 here.
Yeah.
Or Challenger.
Challenger 6, I believe.
Yeah.
I didn't consider the leaving play. You're absolutely right. So that's going to be more than enough to take out the Tiana here. I love Bibbidi Boppidi Boo. It's seen a little bit of a resurgence in this metagame, just with all of the strong interplay cards between Amethyst and Steel as well. I've seen it in a couple of lists, and Emerald Steel as well. Very fun card, but a little bit of a difficult card. It's uninkable, so
Yeah, so I don't know if the Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo's actually played that turn. I think it was like maybe that was the initial thought, and then it was Mo figured out a different way to play it with the snake bounce.
Oh,
on the
okay,
crab.
bouncing the snake with the
Yeah,
crab.
because it is
I'm
still
following.
sitting in hand. Yeah.
Okay,
But
that works just as well.
yeah, I think it ended up working out a little bit better, but still, Crystal representing 4 lore here. Mo not having access to any sort of removal for the most part. It does have access to Kit to maybe bounce something for tempo, but
That is something to mention here. If Crystal can get close enough to 20, Amethyst Emerald, they don't have any removal actions, right? They don't have a way to remove other characters other than potentially bouncing them back to your hand. The Elsa, of course, can force exert characters, which may come into play here.
Tiberius as well. So you Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo the Tiberius, give it Reckless, and now it can no longer quest. So I think that Mo has a firm grip on controlling the rest of this game and actually stopping Crystal from progressing her win condition. But is having to do it in sort of innovative ways because Emerald Amethyst doesn't have access to the traditional removal that we're used to.
Yeah, and with Crystal only drawing 1 card and playing 1 card every turn, especially when they aren't particularly great cards like this 1-drop Robin Hood, it only is going to take time before Mo can catch back up and finish out this game, I think.
And we're going to see another Lyle trigger there as well as this Benja is forced to challenge our Merlin Crabs. She's going to actually lose a lore there. And it does feel like Mo has sort of turned the corner in this match, so it's no longer going to be that significant threat of Crystal being able to sort of sneakily progress the win condition in a very fast way. And we do see our sort of big top end come down in the form of Ursula, Sea Witch Queen, which is a 4/7 and quest for 3.
A very key card into a typical Steel Song matchup. Of course, this is not a very typical deck that Crystal's playing, seeing very little songs, but great card for Amethyst Emerald into an Amber Steel matchup in general because no other characters can sing songs. Kind of shuts down everything that the deck wants to do.
Yep, and Ursula is able to quest and exert other characters. So now we're doing more combat on the board. We're stopping things from questing. We're triggering Tiberius more. Tiberius is just one of the coolest control cards and value cards that exist in Lorcana.
Yeah, and with that 3 lore being gained every single turn, it's only going to take probably 2 more turns for Mo to catch back up and reach this 20 lore point. We see Mo doing exactly that, exerting the Mr. Smee and then trading it with the snake. Of course, Crystal will lose another lore from Tao's ability when the snake is banished. I'm going to go ahead and challenge the Robin Hood with the Lyle as well. Don't want any shift Robin Hoods coming out off the top.
And there is another new card here in the form of Clarabelle. This is going to be our 7-drop. I don't think it's going to be triggering here. It does let you draw up if your opponent has more cards in hand than you. I do think that currently... Does Mo have 0 cards in hand? Mo might actually have 0 cards in hand. I can't tell if, off to the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, he may be playing his hand. Unfortunately, Crystal drew one of the few songs in her deck, Strength of a Raging Fire, with no cards on board. So not going to help her very much and is going to scoop there. Mo taking this game 1.
Yeah, very interesting to see Amethyst Emerald on display there. You see how powerful of sort of a mid-range and control deck that it can be in the right scenario. This is talked about it being a tempo deck. It can definitely be more aggressive, as access to those merfolks, which can be absolutely debilitating for things like Ruby Sapphire. But at the same time, with that Lyle Tiberius package, it can control the board so much and was able to navigate this matchup in an awesome way. I love how this list takes an approach to the game that we're not really used to, where it doesn't have access to that steel removal or that Ruby removal. So, but it does have access to removal in the form of, bouncing Tiberius, giving things Reckless, or, exerting things with Ursula. It's just really cool to see sort of Amethyst and Emerald on display in a more controlling fashion.
It's reminding me a little bit of set 3. Amethyst Emerald was a pretty good deck in that metagame as well. And now that Mo knows this kind of Amber Steel deck that Crystal is playing, I think he can be a lot more comfortable in what he's playing against, knowing this isn't much of a song variation of the deck. And typically these Amethyst Emerald decks have a really great time into these more aggressive decks as well. So I'm eager to see how this next matchup goes, or this next game goes in this match.
Well, let's head down to the table and get into it. Interestingly, doesn't have to, now knows they just have to worry about a whole new world at all, which is probably something that was in his mind in the first few turns of game 1 there.
Yeah, so if you're Mo here and you don't see a whole new world at all in that entire game from Crystal, do you assume that there is just none in the deck, or do
Yeah.
you still try to play around a little bit and say, well, maybe they just didn't see the 4, that is typically in these decks?
So it's less about not seeing any whole new worlds, although that is like the biggest tell, but it's also just the kind of cards that Crystal has in her deck. We saw just in time, we've seen tons of 1-drops. Like, it just does not look like the current shells that have a whole new world. That being said, I think if you took a sample size of all the Amber Steel decks in the room right now, I think less than 10% of them would be not be playing a whole new world. So it is very unlikely that they're not, but I would say you can take enough from that game to make the conclusion that Crystal is not playing a whole.
Also,
And Chris Murfolk turn 1. Morgan also on the play after winning game 1. Very strong position here.
very strong position for Mo. We do see a pretty strong opening for Crystal, though. I see a Daisy Duck in hand along with a Pooh Pirate Captain, so we are going to see the Daisy being played, inking the Robin Hood. Some Lilos in hand, too. A pretty aggressive opening, but of course, being on the draw, going second, that does set you back a little bit as an aggressive deck.
Yeah, really hard to deal with Daisy Duck in an efficient way for Morgan here. But that being said, that Daisy Duck is pretty much going to draw Morgan a card every single time it quests, because Morgan does have 50 characters in the deck. And due to there being no whole new world, that card advantage is relevant. We're going to bounce that Curse Merfolk back to hand.
Just in case Crystal wants to challenge the Curse Merfolk with the Daisy, but I think more times than not, Crystal's just questing with this Daisy here. We'll
For
see.
sure. I think also, just wanting to get stats onto the board to actually remove this Daisy as soon as possible. Has a Crab in hand, so that was really the biggest play. So Crab plus the Mana Mim is going to go ahead and clear this Daisy in one go. And, 1-drop, 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 it can be kind of scary when you are on potentially a slower deck.
Yeah, one thing that Amethyst Ruby lacks a little bit is that board wipe, the board removal, right? So if you can build up a very wide deck and keep wide board and keep some of these characters in play and from being banished, then Amethyst Emerald can struggle with it, but with these characters having so low stats, it might be a little bit more difficult in order to actually do that. Morgan very likely can just trade with a lot of these characters pretty efficiently. As you mentioned, there was the Crab in hand to banish this Daisy this turn if we want to play it.
Yeah, I do think that's the play that we're going to go for. It does bring Kit Cloud Kicker to the front of the hand. Maybe deciding what to ink here, whether it's going to be the Kit or the friends on the other side. Like we're going to see ink friends on the other side, and there comes our Crab. We're going to target our Mana Mim Snake. It's going to have 6 strength now. It's going to clear that Daisy Duck. 1 damage counter for the exchange. And now, you have a board of Captain Hook and Lilo. It's looking a little rough against, 2 3/3s on the opposing side.
It is. We do have an ability to play this Pooh Pirate Captain that if we keep the Captain Hook around, we have the, okay, so this is kind of big. This is where we see where the Just in Time is very powerful. On turn 3, Crystal's able to play it and immediately play a Robin Hood. Can't challenge with the Robin Hood if it was shifted like we normally see in these lines, but Robin Hood has a lot of stats. Not only that, I love Robin Hood in Amber Steel specifically because of his ability to basically play offense and defense. Being able to challenge, banish other characters, and gain lore at the same time is something that you usually can't do.
So Morgan just ripped a very, very interesting card. It's You're Welcome, a new addition to the deck here. Shuffle a chosen character into that player's deck. That player draws 2 cards. Does end up inking it. I did think was going to potentially play it on the Robin Hood. Morgan definitely a better Amethyst Emerald pilot than I am. Gonna likely clear this Lilo.
Pretty good hit there with the Ursula Deceiver as well. Crystal only having the Pooh Pirate Captain and the Strength of Raging Fire in hand, so getting rid of 1 extra card from Crystal's hand. We saw how much she struggled a little bit last game, not having much draw power. Did we play that Bonsai? I love Bonsai. It's another new card. Pretty aggressive, a 3/2 with 2 lore.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I was asking, some of these Amethyst Emerald players, like, why is this made into the list? A 3/2 uninkable. It's because, questing for 2 is on the more aggressive line, but also it just often trades equal or trades up because of that 3/2 stat line. And it is a must answer. You can't let something just kind of sit on board and quest for 2, so it has to be answered, and then it's usually trading equal. Also helps you a bit with locations.
We do notice that Morgan decided not to exert any of their characters last turn, not allowing Crystal to challenge any of them with Robin Hood. So Crystal instead is just going to quest with this Lilo, get an extra 2 Lord, and then quest with the Robin Hood, even though Morgan has the ability to banish it this next turn by challenging both the Merlin and the Bonsai. Not to mention if Morgan has any other bounce cards in hand like a Fox. I don't see anything. But another thing I love about Robin Hood is if he's banished in a challenge, you do get to draw a card. And so there's not very many ways for Morgan to get rid of this Robin Hood outside of challenging. So Crystal is very likely going to be able to draw a card if that's what Mo decides to do.
Yep. So it does with the leaves trigger does target the Ursula. Crystal is going to draw a card that is a trigger off of our Robin Hood. Likely going to trade with this Lilo here as well. And now that's the thing about the Piglet here is that while it is one of the most powerful aggressive cards in the game, it can be a tough card to get going in a metagame that's dominated by removal, but also a metagame where people are able to tap your things down and trade with you efficiently via combat here.
You're definitely right. Piglet Poo Pirate Captain can be very aggressive. Unfortunately, you have to have 2 other characters in play before it can quest for 3 lore. Otherwise, it's only questing for that 1. And when Mo has done such a good job at banishing Crystal's board state, and Crystal not having very many cards in hand, drawing another song, only being able to play 1 character this turn, this Piglet's not going to be able to quest for 3 like she would like.
Yeah, absolutely. We do see Strength of the Raging Fire back into the hand again. With not much of a board presence, is able to get rid of the Merfolk though, which is not nothing.
Interested to see getting rid of the Merfolk instead of something like the Bonsai being able to challenge back and also quest for 2 lore.
Yeah, considering they have no cards in hand, do you feel like trading with the Merfolk would actually be pretty safe here, right? Because the trigger that usually is the downside for engaging with the Merfolk would not be active.
That's definitely the place that I was going in my mind. If I don't have very many cards in hand, then trading with the Merfolk, if I'm forced to, doesn't feel as bad. You see Fire the Cannon, so another opportunity to banish either this kit or the Bonsai if Crystal decides to play it. Choosing to hit the kit here that just bounced the Robin Hood back to Crystal's hand, I believe, which just got replayed this turn.
Yep, and looks like we do see friends on the other side come off the top for Morgan. And Morgan, as soon as Morgan transitions, I do think that Morgan is firmly in the driver's seat here. But as soon as he finds something like that Ursula or that Clarabelle with that 4/7 stat line or that 5/6, not much that Crystal's going to be able to do against that. Right now, board is at parity, but Morgan just with so much more card advantage, and Crystal not really having that out of potentially something like a whole new world off the top to refill. And Morgan, this is kind of where Morgan's deck wants to be as the Emerald player.
Yeah, and we do have another goat in hand by Morgan as well. Had the snake in hand, deciding to basically take 1 damage off of the Bonsai, playing it to bounce the Bonsai and replay Bonsai as well. So I definitely agree with you. I think Morgan's in the driver's table. Was that just in time?
That was a just in time off the
Crystal
top.
just drew? Oh man, that feels so bad.
High risk, high reward with that card. Cheating out a 5-drop on turn 3, an incredibly powerful thing to do. Almost unfairly powerful. 5 drops are meant to come down on turn 5, not on turn 3. That being said, when you draw it as your 1 card in hand in the mid game to the late game, it is devastating.
It can be very punishing.
This is the second time this has happened.
Yeah, Mo just sees the just in time in hand with playing the Ursula Deceiver, getting a look. Of course, only thing in Crystal's hand. We're going to trade with that Piglet, with the Madam M Snake, or not trade. The Madam M Snake's only going to take 2 damage, but we're clearing Crystal's board here. Mo having a very strong board against Crystal's, catching up in lore at this point, I believe. Crystal only getting to 10 this game. Passing it over to Crystal. We'll see what she gets off the top. Does have 5 ink if we have a 5 cost. Okay, just a Benja.
Yeah.
Not going to do much. Doesn't trade too well into everything. Can only quest for 2 lore.
Yep, I think that Morgan, as a result, is going to be turning everything sideways here. Just find a rabbit for his troubles.
And to mention, Morgan does have 5 lore on his side of the board, so if we just quest with everything here, play 1 or 2 more characters, Crystal can really only get rid of 1 character, maybe 2 if we get lucky and draw another card. We can keep 5 lore on board for Mo, then that's just game. Also having the goat that'll gain a lore when it enters play as well. 2 goats on board now means that if you remove both of them, that's 2 lore added, the most total on top of that.
Oh.
Do you see a Chinpo?
Chinpo comes off the top. But Unfortunately, due to the dynamic of the game, Morgan is definitely the beatdown here and is the aggressive deck. We just see the hand extended, and Morgan takes a 2-0. So 2-2-0s back-to-back. We did mention how important it is to be going 2-0 at these early stages of the tournament. So, yeah, very good news for our two players that were able to take it, both in the form of Zan and Morgan.
Yeah, definitely. We saw the strength and power that comes with Amethyst Emerald and how well it plays into these aggressive decks. Once you can get the board under control and you're able to use some of your bounce package to gain value in the trades that you're making by healing your characters or maybe bouncing rabbits or goats to gain lore and draw cards, all you have to do is get into that midpoint of the game, get your opponent down on a couple cards or almost no cards in hand, crystal very few for most of that game, and pretty smooth sailing from there.
Yep. Amethyst Emerald, what an awesome deck to see. I know a deck that is not very well represented in the metagame right now, but a deck that I know some players were swearing by as we led into both the tournament here in Vegas and in Birmingham. You know, people think that this is sort of is a deck that could take down the tournament.
Definitely, and not to mention, I don't know what the stats are for our friends over in Europe for the Birmingham, but I know Amethyst Emerald has been pretty popular over there as well. I think it was the 4th most represented deck here today, so I'm very interested to see if somebody can take it. So very exciting round 2, but with that, we're going to be moving on to round 3 after this very short break.
Welcome, Illumineers, again for another wonderful interview. We have a special guest here. Shane Hartley is with me, who is the creative director of global games at Ravensburger. Thanks, Shane, for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is amazing.
Yeah, how has your experience been so far, interacting with the community here at the challenge?
Oh, it's so great. Like, this is my first challenge. Like, I've been traveling and working and such, of course, so I haven't been able to come out. And this has been an amazing experience. I love hearing everybody's stories and like talking to them and being like, this is my first challenge, or this is my first TCG, or, you know, like I met my wife in this game, you know what I mean? Like, that's just so cool.
I love it. Do you have any particular memories so far with the community? Any interactions that kind of stand out to you?
So we had one yesterday where we talked to a woman. She's a NICU nurse, and she lives in LA. She came straight off of her shift when she found out that she was going to be able to play Ryan in the lottery, and she drove from LA straight from her shift and came straight here. No sleep.
Amazing. I mean, the fans are incredible. Obviously, the community loves the game and they love the art. And it's not just the person who's on, you know, the illustrator's name is on the bottom of the cards, but as the creative director, you oversee an entire team of people, art directors, concept artists. If you could put all the names that are involved in a card, how much space, how many names would it take up?
Yeah, I don't think there would be space for sure. Like, we'd have to start doing like fold out accordion cards, you know, which then wouldn't fit in the decks. But
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about what it's like to have that huge team coming together to bring these cards to life?
I often imagine it like I'm very much this, because a lot of people they don't know what does a creative director do, you know, like what does that mean? And I often say that it's very similar to like a movie director, where you have all these people that have like really amazing specialties, and they're artists and they're like perfect at their craft, and then your job is to kind of take it and figure out how do we put it all together so that the vision and like everything, and it comes out this beautiful masterpiece. And so that's where I sit, you know, and I'm, you know, my team. So I have the narrative team is under me, and I have a narrative director that's amazing, and they know their Disney content, they know what's going on, they are able to take all the Disney IP and figure out like how do we wrap it in this beautiful new world that we've created, new realm, should I say?
Right. Yes, and it really is a new realm, and you have done a lot of world building
Yes.
with Disney Lorcana. Can you talk a little bit about what exactly does that mean? I know some people may have heard the term world building before, but what does that look like for Disney Lorcana?
Yeah, so world building encompasses more than just art. Like we have a concept art team that does a lot of visual development. We have concept artists that do just like the costumes of characters. We have a narrative team that does the writing around that. We develop things like what is the certain area of this land look like? What is the what is this castle going to look like? What, you know, and we look at it from a thematic standpoint too. Every time we're like, it's not just like, okay, we created Lorcana and we're done. You know, like we can just throw more Disney into it. It's like every set has a world building like stage. So think of it like, I'm just gonna throw out like, say we decide the world was magically changed into candy everything. You know, all of a sudden we have to develop like, what does that look like? What does a candy castle look like? What is, what is a mountain of candy, and like all these different things we have to start to think about. And then, how do the characters interact with that world? What is different about that? What caused that? Like, why did everything change into candy? I'm using some random. This is not no spoilers, I promise. Like, I just randomly came up with a theme, and now my narrative team is like, dang it, we can't do the candy now.
So much detail, though, goes into that world building, and each set kind of has its own feel to it. And is there any of the 6 sets that we've had so far? Do you have a favorite? Obviously, we've only seen a little tiny bit of set 6.
I was like 6. You guys
Yeah, I know.
still-
Yeah, 6. We have some glimpses of.
I mean, we were very like, the Ursula build-up was a huge deal for us, and we were kind of glad that people kind of figured it out along the way. But at the same time, there was still stuff that people didn't figure out, which is great. We love the kind of like putting that stuff in, and that build-up and that storytelling around that, and how that. Because also, not only because it was just a cool build-up, and like Ursula, and she's amazing, of course,
Yes.
and like her kind of how she kind of grew to power within Lorcana, but the idea that her growth to power was also integral to setting the scene for Lorcana as a realm. You know, if it wasn't for her escape, we wouldn't have Floodborn.
That's very true. Yeah.
So all of these things were all like tied together, and that's a really cool, way of like that we're not just telling stories that we think are cool. Like, oh, what if, all of a sudden Ursula is gonna, be the one that, I mean, villains do what villains do, but we have to kind of, how do we blend all that together? How do we make it an interesting storytelling that it's not something you heard before, but it also feels familiar with the Disney franchise?
Yeah.
So those are those things we work through. And so I love Ursula. I love what's coming. So it's going to be really fun. And
Can you say anything about what's coming? We know there's a nautical theme going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always a sense of adventure. There's always going to new places and new areas. Like we want the world, the realm of Lorcana to feel like, so just in the fact that like when you spill a bottle of ink, that idea that like it's always flowing and mixing, and you can't put that ink back in the bottle. It's really tough to do that, and so for us, it's like the world of the inkscape is just changing always. And things that you thought were solid and done, those could change as well. So.
Well, lots of exciting changes ahead for the future of Lorcana.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for chatting with me, Shane.
Of course.
And I hope the rest of your time here at the challenge is great, and we're going to go to a break.
Thanks.
I absolutely love hearing from Shane there. So a couple little tidbits from him, some narrative details, perhaps, or alluding to some details.
Candy set coming soon.
Yeah.
Confirmed. Absolutely confirmed. We're getting a candy set. We're going to go up to Candy Mountain, do all kinds of crazy stuff. I'm in for it.
He didn't quite say that, but
He definitely
Mountain.
did. He did not say that.
be fun. No, but no, it's go great. And one of the things about these challenges is we're so used to, we know that they bring all the players together with the judges and other members of the team. But at this challenge in particular, we get to have Ryan Miller, Steve Warner, and Shane Hartley, three of the biggest names behind this game here. And the game team gets a lot of praise, and rightfully so. But without the work of the creative team, the artists, it's just mechanics. And unless you feel like you're telling a story when you play the game, it's not Disney Lorcana. So I appreciate the work that Shane and his team do, and it was great to hear from him here.
Yeah, absolutely. I came to the game a little bit later than you, and I've fallen in love with it over about the last, 6 months now? God, it feels like it's been so much
flown
longer.
by,
Yeah,
huh?
I know, it's just flown by. And I'm absolutely in love with the game. I love the artwork. Things that can turn me off from a game pretty fast is if you see it and you're like, you don't resonate with the artwork, right? Or you don't resonate with the characters, or you don't like mechanics of the game, that can kind of take away from it for you. Here, I've actually just loved every part of it. The artwork's great. I love the subtle plays on things, the way they change things up a little bit. And one of the points I think he made that was really great that I love is they don't just make cards. They don't just take Mickey and Minnie and put them somewhere. They're like, no, we get a whole storyboard idea, and we think of a world that they're going to be in, and that's the set, and we cater everything to that. And seeing the different versions of characters and how they cater to that world has been absolutely awesome to see. Love it.
Yeah, it's a ton of fun. And speaking of stories, not only does Lorcana have an overarching story, but this tournament has a story. And one of the storylines in this tournament is the prevalence of Steel Song in the meta, and one of the big responses, which is Ruby Sapphire, the two most prominent decks, most well-represented decks at this tournament, and we're going to get to see them go head-to-head here.
Yeah, absolutely. So in this matchup, we're going to see, like you said, these two decks go head-to-head, and it could be a little bit of a rough matchup for Amber Steel sometimes. It depends on how the early game goes. But once you get later in the game, generally Blue-Red, Ruby Sapphire is going to have an advantage there. They're going to be playing cards that cost 7, 8, and 9, while Amber Steel's going to draw a 1-drop or draw a 2-drop. And, they got to keep up. And it also matters. The biggest thing I think to look out for here is the card that gets me the most when I'm on Amber Steel is if they have Quill or not. If they have Quill, because they want to get as much ink into play as quickly as possible, because that makes your whole new world, which is the most powerful card in your deck, it makes that card not as good. It's not as palatable to give your opponent 7 cards when they have a huge ink lead on you. That's not great, because the reason Amber Steel is so good is because of the prevalence of singers early in the game, it gets to use more ink than its opponent does early in the game. They're like, play a 1-drop, play a 2-drop, sing a song, next turn, play a 3-drop, sing a song as well, while they're drawing cards the whole time doing this, and they're more efficient than any other deck in the first 4 turns of the game.
That's absolutely true. Do more things than your opponent early. Yeah, that's
generally it's a winning strategy.
That's right.
Yeah. So,
all right, shall we get into it?
Yeah, we're gonna do it. Let's go ahead on down to the feature match, and let's go see if these players. Let's see if the game plays out that way or not.
Yeah, so on the left here, we have Zelda Parker on Ruby Sapphire, and on the right, Braden Pearson on Amber Steel, on Steel Song. We're right into it with a Tinkerbell into the Inkwell, followed by first turn Cinderella.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the scary start. Cinderella always is the best 1-drop, and it's got the scariest starts for them. But I want to talk about that was a Tinkerbell that got put into the Inkwell as well. So we're already seeing that this is a slightly bigger version of Amber Steel that we've seen some of the players kind of progress to as we've gone down the. So it looks like we're going to go ahead and let Bare Necessities.
Yeah, now this is great. So Brendan here being on the play is looking to pick. Ideally, he wants to get that turn 2 ramp card out. So that one jump ahead, if that's the card that Zelda will use to ramp. We don't have that here. Instead, we have the Tipo, which Zelda will use on turn 2 to ramp her ink. Instead, there's a couple options here. There is the Be Prepared. Now, Brandon will have several turns to prepare that. Instead, we'll get rid of the How Far I'll Go.
And yeah, I got to agree with Brandon here, taking care of How Far I'll Go. The way you want to play this here is if you don't get the important card, right? If you don't get something like the Fishbone Quill, that's the #1 hit. Sometimes you can win a game off just that alone. You want to kind of break up the curve of Zelda, the way that she's going to play this game, the way that it's going to progress naturally. And that was going to be Tipo into How Far I'll Go into something like the Be Prepared. So not only is this, you don't get to take the Be Prepared, but you get to kind of prevent Zelda from playing it earlier in the game as well and sculpting their hand a little bit better.
Yeah, so here I want to talk about the Smee on turn 2 because Brandon has really 2 lines that he could take to really win this game. The first one against this control deck is an aggressive, a lot of lore early with Smees, Piglets perhaps, sometimes Daisy Duck. And then there's another line which is singing A Whole New World early. So playing that Smee, it looks like he's setting up to do, to get some early lore. Now, however, we do see the aerial on turn 3. We are taking the Whole New World. Perhaps we could see an early Whole New World if Brandon's not able to go wide.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the Smee, I love that you mentioned this. Smee is one of the best cards in this deck. I absolutely love this. It's one of the best 2-drops in the game. It does do what he's doing here. It does lure up pretty fast. It's going to put damage on itself. So it does lure up really fast, right? It also checks characters early as well, so you don't get run over. But also this helps make the card Rapunzel in your deck a lot better as well. So if you were to hold a world into Rapunzel next turn, he can draw an entire fistful of new cards or anything like he wants as well there. So because this deck is a well-oiled machine, but a lot of times you have to get kind of creative with some of your plays. And is that a Fishbone Quill from Zelda? That's a very nice type deck from her.
Yeah, so that's a great top deck. In this matchup, that's what you want to do is ramp twice before they get the Whole New World off. And again, as you pointed out, if Zelda can get additional ink into the inkwell before the Whole New World goes off, she starts to build that resource advantage, that ink advantage. But it's a great line that you pointed out here. Braden now with the whole world, or Brandon with a Whole New World in hand, can sing it on his turn. He'll have the ink to play the Rapunzel on the Smee, and get some cards out of it and start to go wide here. Of course, on the other side, Zelda now has used both Tipo and Fishbone Quill a couple times now to put cards in the inkwell, and is now sitting on 1 card. So where Brandon may have been thinking about earlier, hey, perhaps I want to go into a Whole New World, now that's not as appealing.
That is absolutely a perfect point to make here. We went from being very far ahead by Brandon here and being able to probably have a Whole New World this turn to where the top deck of Fishbone Quill makes it to where I'm not sure he wants to do it anymore. It matters like he might not have a lot of stuff going on in his hand, or this might just be the best play line for him to begin with anyway. You might do that along. Also, we see a Lantern in his hand, too. That's a point of contention in these decks, is do you play Lantern or do you not? With the Tinkerbell going to the Inkwell early and showing that, this is more of a Lantern deck where he has that, he has Big Cinderella and some of the bigger plays that he can make. And I like Lantern in this version a lot more than the ones that are closer to the ground. We've seen them play no items, or we've seen them play Flute in some of these spots as well.
That's true. Lantern's a card that has come back in favorability recently. Brandon DeCandio is a fantastic player who's won some big events and popularized Lantern again. One of the things that Lantern does, and the reason you'll see a lot of them here, is that it helps you in the draw on the mirror. And so in a meta where you expect a lot of Steel Song into each other, Lantern's a card that helps you there.
I want to kind of point out here what just happened this turn. Brandon went ahead and played a Prince Naveen with the Whole New World in his hand, decided not to do it. You don't have to play the song off the Prince Naveen trigger, and you can see that he knows the last card in Zelda's hand was Be Prepared. So what he's going to do here is he's going to be like, all right, well, you have a card that you can't play. Hopefully the next card you draw isn't good either, which we see it is actually pretty good here. With Brawl, it takes down a double questing Prince Naveen. But I actually kind of like that. If they're going to be drawing 1 card a piece each turn, but you know that your opponent's card isn't very good, I'm not going to give you a for 7 when you have more ink than I do.
No, Zelda's in pure top deck mode here, and especially if I'm counting right, you have 5 ink, so that Be Prepared is 7. It's a card that Zelda would love to play, but I need 2 more ink to do it. So Zelda really here hoping for a Flavisham or something that'll recharge her hand.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wonder if this is the turn where we do actually see a Whole New World, because we know the last card is Be Prepared. We can take it away from her for this turn as well. Plus, let's see, does he get a song of this? He gets a second Whole New World, I believe. So it looks like he's going to not go ahead and take that. And it looks like, are we going to sing a Whole New World here or not? And he has the, he has the option to, but it looks like he's just going to go ahead and lure up not using the Smee here, making sure he gets to keep that around because he knows he gets at least one more turn of this. I think we're going to see a whole new world next turn, most likely.
Yeah, it's definitely so a whole new world. I mean, it's a tough call here because we do have a decent number of lore on board. You have control of the board, and Zelda drawing into another uninkable is not able to get closer, but using that Fishbone Quill to put the ice block in.
Yeah, absolutely. Great play by Zelda. Put the Fishbone Quill into the Inkwell with that. And this is exactly what I was talking about. You're hoping that they draw a card that isn't good, right? That doesn't do anything. And we saw exactly that happen there with another copy of Ice Block for Zelda. So that's exactly what Brandon actually wanted here. And again, we're in that spot. Do you want to play the whole new world or not? And I do. I actually want to play whole new world. It looks like he agrees as well, just because you don't recover well from the Be Prepared.
No.
If you had 4 more cards in your hand here, I would actually be like, sure, play the Be Prepared, and then I'm going to play 3 characters next turn, and then see if we can win from there.
Nope, you're exactly right. At that point, Zelda's able to, with the Fishbone Quill, any card she draws can reset the board with a Be Prepared. Now she'll be in top deck mode, but Brandon then would have to rebuild his board as well. Here, drawing into a new group of cards, has a few cards we can drop, and has those singers available as well. So plenty of options available with the ink and the singers available. And the lantern to make things a little cheaper.
Yeah, I was going to say, we got lantern, we got a couple ink, we have the Cinderella, and this is what I was talking about going in. This is what makes this deck so good, is just how efficient it is. I mean, even the turns where you have to pay 5 ink to Whole New World, if you still have other things in play too, like you have some singers, you can still sing a song off that. If you want to do that as well, if you have, some of the smaller singers like Cinderella or Ursula. And Pete is a really good play here as well. And the fact that this is going to keep Be Prepared from being an option for Zelda for at least one turn. And Brady can start to go a little bit further wide here, which you see that with the Piglet play here, which is going to be questing for 3 next turn.
I mean, not only is it questing for 3, but it's preventing Smee from taking damage because Piglet Poo Pirate Captain is a captain, and so Smee is now unleashed to start getting lore again.
That's a really good point out and catch from you there. Got a captain in play now as well.
Yeah, and Zelda with an unfortunate draw here, a couple of one jumps ahead.
Well,
Are you sure
it's a captain? Because it looks like the Swede did take the damage there, so I trust you more than me on this.
It is a captain. Piglet
Okay.
is Poo Pirate Captain, and it one of the benefits of it in this build is it does.
Does it have to
prevent
be
that
Captain
damage.
Hook
Nope.
specifically
nope.
for me?
Any captain, yeah. So it should not have taken damage there from itself.
Yeah, it looks like we're going to have the Ice Block probably targeting, I was going to say probably targeting Pete here. Fishbone Quill is going to go ahead and put something into the Inkwell. It looks like this is going to be a big Sisu play here.
Yeah, Sisu, great play here. Will take care of most everything.
And yeah, this is one of the problems that we talk about when we get to the later turns and the more ink from the Amber Steel side is there's almost no way to play around Sisu.
Yep.
It's just going to get you. You can play around Be Prepared as best you possibly can. You saw Pete do a lot of work there in playing around Be Prepared, but not a lot you can do about the inevitability of Sisu.
That is true. And I said most everything, but with the Ice Block used on Pete, does take care of everything.
Those dang Sisu and Ice players and their tricksy decks.
Yeah, so Zelda doesn't have an ideal hand here. A couple Kuzcos, which are not, they're situational. We can use it to get rid of that lantern if we want to. But on the other side here, Brandon rather, has some choices to make. There's some removal there. We could put the Rapunzel down for some lore, but let's see. Okay, we're going to play the Pete.
Yeah, it looks like it's Pete and then backed up with not a lot going on here. So let's see if Braden's going to be able to. The thing is like sometimes you can kind of recover from the first sweeper by playing multiple characters and being able to like possibly lure up for the win, or something to get some of your card advantage stuff going on again. Some more aerials, some stuff like that. Maybe find another whole new world. Braden hasn't had a chance to do that just yet.
No, it is a challenge here. Nowadays with lanterns working back into the meta, Sleepy's Flutes have really fallen out of favor. And so against these control decks that gain control of the board late, Sleepy's Flute is a way that these decks close out the game. One of the reasons the Sleepy's Flute kind of fell out of favor was because of Pete's introduction into the meta. Pete means you have to take a turn off from singing songs. So if you're using your flutes, 1 or 2 of them, to count you towards the end of the game, having to take 2 or 3 turns off isn't palatable. So without those flutes, though, Brandon's going to have to build up a board presence in order to get that last bit of lore, which is going to be a challenge now that we're at this stage of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. You see Zelda's even starting up the lore train here as well after removing the last character from Brandon's point of view. And again, this is where you start to run into the problem. You do not recover super well from the sweepers here. We'll see. I think a Smee was added to hand here. It's going to be definitely a deployment this turn. It's a strength of a Raging Fire, a Naveen, and a whole new world behind this.
I mean, you could, at some point, you could Naveen into a whole new world, but again,
I think that's what's actually possibly going to happen here. So it looks
Yeah.
like Naveen, and are we going to play? The Strength of Raging Fire doesn't really do much for you here. There's 2 popsicles on the side of Zell, so you can't even really do the whole like delayed turn removal. And you're going to go ahead. It looks like it is just going to be a pass and no whole new world here.
yeah,
Naveen an okay play here. It does quest for 2. He is, and Braden is at 12, so he has 4 lore on board right now, face up.
and I think that's the calculation here because, I mean, at this point, with this much ink on the board and that many items on the board, giving Zelda a whole new hand of cards, perhaps a Tamatoa, which, we know, I think there's a Tamatoa in hand. Brandon doesn't know that, or a Lucky Dime, or, another board wipe, is unpalatable. So I think playing the lore game here.
Yeah, so it's going to be both ways. So I think the start of the next turn, depending on what card he draws, is just going to be Naveen's going to sing Whole New World. This way he gets to fully start his turn with the fresh 7. You won't have Naveen to sing anymore, but this at least gives you a lot more, things to do. I love this, by the way. Whenever you get your lanterns put into your inkwell, it's practically the same thing. It's like, you would say it's apples to apples. But there's not much else targeting for Cusco. So in this matchup, and they want to get a big character to play that has 2 lore here. So Cusco, like you said, not great in this matchup. Generally, it's ink early in the game for this kind of stuff. But I think it's going to come down to what does Brandon draw off of the whole new world here. But I don't even know if that can get him out of it anymore, just because I don't know if he's going to be able to answer everything on the board that's so problematic for him from Zelda.
Yeah, definitely play to your outs, and that's I think you're right. That's what Brandon's going to do here. Zelda finally gets the Flavisham online, so that card advantage will be online, or that card draw engine, from this point forward.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a turn that gets Brandon out of this from the Silsong side. So he draws, I was supposed to say, I can't remember the last card in his hand is if it's Inkable. It's Strength of a Raging Fire. So you maybe draw an Inkable card here, put it into your Inkwell, draw a fresh 7, and see where we go from here. But I think he drew Zeus. So is there anything that we absolutely have to Zeus here? Like, do you have to Zeus down to Flaversome?
I mean, I think the Sisu is the bigger threat.
Yeah, I was going to say, just depending on what he thinks here in the spot.
Yeah, the Zeus won't kill or deal with the Flavisham on its own. So I think you're right. Perhaps we ink and then draw into a new set, have a lot of options available. But one thing you can do here with the amount of ink you have available is sing a whole new world, and then hope that you draw into a lot of high lore, low cost characters and go wide, because then you're really forcing Zelda to have that be prepared, to have that answer. And if you don't, you're only looking at 8 lore, and with Smee this turn, 6 lore. And so we do play the Along Came Zeus there.
Yeah, take it down the Sisu, like you were saying. Very good call.
But I think that might be the answer here. One of the outs is to force Zelda again onto defense by using the whole new world and then trying to dump your hand and forcing Zelda to have the answer, which is the board wipe.
It does look like he's just going to go ahead and quest for 4 here and said that he's decided that this is the way I'm going to win. I'm going to quest for 4 here, up to 16, and then try to find the last few pieces to be able to get that done. Not sure about that, if it's going to work out, because of the fact that he has 2 non-characters in hand, 2 more cards that don't get lore, and this deck has a very high amount of songs in it, not to mention other lanterns that he could draw. There's upwards of like 20-something cards he could draw here that don't have lore on them, so I'll see if this works out or not.
That's true. But Zelda now having to spend resources rather than questing with those 2 characters, that Cusco and Medusa, having to deal with the characters on board, most likely. It looks like we are going to draw with the Flavisham, get some more information there. Have a Vitalosphere and a Brawl. We do have the Ice Block, so the Brawl is an option here.
Yep, that could allow her to actually quest up here this turn as well. I got to check the math on that. It'll get you up to 11. You could possibly close this game out in the next turn or 2 as well. Looks like we got a Dragon, or let's say another Sisu here. Okay, nice.
Use the Ice Block, reduce Naveen's strength, get it off the board with Sisu. Puts a lot of lore on the board.
Yep, challenge in here. Nice challenge as well. It's going to leave a character behind after this challenge. And yeah, I don't know if Brandon can come back through. I'm trying to think what card. I guess you have to draw a card that quests for 2, and even then, I don't know if you're going to be able to keep up with what Zelda's going to do over the next turn or 2.
So let's see if Zelda has it to close out next turn, because I do think...
You're going to be able to quest for 5 this turn, right?
Yes. 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, it's going to be tough. So We go to 11 this turn. You know what they say about doing math in public.
Yeah.
So with what's on board, we have 5, 6, 7 lore. That's not enough to close out the game there. Of course, the Sapphire deck's always running the Lucky Dime, and so that's available there. So it looks like, you know, Brendan may have another turn. And I think the only real answer here is
Well, so that's a big Cinderella. So this is going to be able to lure for 3
yes,
next turn. So is that he's still going to be 1 short?
still going to be 1 short.
And there's usually no card in Amber Steel that can just gain a lore unless you're playing the flutes. So
Unless you're running Sleepy's Flute or something. I mean, there's Philoctetes, which
Sure,
could do that,
sure.
but you don't see those run very much.
yeah.
Or I think ever now. But so that's going to leave Brendan 1 short. Zelda, I don't think will be able to close it out this turn unless we draw into a Lucky Dime. But we will resist is a great ability, except against Maleficent's Dragonfire ability.
Yeah, I love whenever you just see like big knight like characters get destroyed by Maleficent. It's just so flavorful. That, you know, knight went up against a dragon. What would really happen? You know, we always see the the cartoons and the TV shows where the knight can withstand a dragon. Let's be real. You're not standing up to a dragon, especially not Maleficent.
Not Maleficent. The Mistress of Evil.
Yep, sounds like a good way to quest up
Really?
a bunch here.
Yep. So we'll see if Brendan takes another turn, but this is just. I mean, there's no good answer here.
Yeah, Vitalis Willer's going to go away, draw 2 more fresh cards for Zelda, but I don't think she's going to even need them. I don't know of a card in Brandon's deck from the Amber Steel side that can get him out of this spot going forward from here. But you might as well go through all the motions. No reason not to.
Yeah, I can't see how much ink is available. I do think, you know, the one out may be. I mean, you can't deal with your opponent's board, but you know, Singing a Whole New World, putting multiple high lore characters on the board, like a Smee paired with a Piglet, that you could then get more lore in the following turn to quest for 4, would be an answer. But now at this point in the game, we have to deal with the characters on Zelda's side, and it's just gonna be rough.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if there's a way that Brandon can get out of here, but it looks like he's going to go ahead and group on. He draws for his turn.
We'll go over. We'll take a look. See what we get. Strength of a Raging, or I'm sorry, Let the Storm Rage On. Not a card that's going to help terribly much in this scenario.
Yep, he's going to go ahead and take care of the Madame Medusa, though. This gets him a card deeper. Another Cinderella. That's a very nice big Cinderella as well.
Beautiful Lorcana Challenge prize well
Yep.
Cinderella.
It does look like we're going to go into game 2 here. And let's talk about this just for a second here and what happened in this game. And this is generally what's going to happen between Ruby Amethyst and, between Blue Red and Amber Steel, where if that Quill hadn't come off the top for Zelda, I think that game is drastically different. You know, you saw Brandon very hesitant to and even refusing to play Whole New World in a lot of spots. If there was no Quill there, I think for sure, not only does he do it that turn, but you know, he's going to do the second one as well pretty fast, because this is the problem. If you could ever play this game where they maybe have 1 ramp spell, like they have one of the 2-drop ones, but no Quill, you're fine. They are incentivized, the Blue-Red player is incentivized so heavily on putting as much ink to play early in the game and getting cards out of their hand that this is why we're seeing Tipo become so much more popular. It's a lot for this matchup. Tipo getting one of the cards out of your hand into your Inkwell is actually advantageous for you against cards like a Whole New World. If you ever go Tipo into Fishbone Quill, your opponent actually just like can't play Whole New World. So now it's just like a dead card. Or if they do, you get so much advantage from this now because you're generally 2, 3, sometimes even 4 ink ahead of them. And now if they have Singers out, you're still at like parity with the amount of ink you have. And then your cards are more powerful, right? Because like now you're playing cards like Sisu, you're playing cards like Be Prepared, and they don't recover well from them. So you saw a good start, a very, very good start. But the thing is, you can't bear necessities to the top of their deck. You can only get the cards that are in their hand, and that Quill at the top was just a little too good.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. You know, for the Ruby Sapphire player, one of the keys in this matchup is getting to 6, 7 ink as fast as possible. So as you pointed out, you really need to hit that ramp. And so yeah, it's in this matchup you're doing one of 2 things as the Steel Song player, which again, this is a match you're not favored into. You have I think a slight advantage on the Ruby Sapphire player has a slight advantage on the draw, a big advantage on the play for a variety of reasons. It has to do with the timing of the Whole New World and the timing of her ramp spells. But there's really 2 approaches for the Steel Song player. One is go wide early, or the other one is to do a very early Whole New World, which throws off the hand that the Ruby Sapphire player is altered into. And so we're going to be one of the catches though for the Ruby Sapphire player is Zelda needs to kind of read which one of those approaches her opponent is taking. When the early turns, she's going to be looking for an indication of, is the Steel Song player building up into that early whole new world, and that'll lead me to do certain things, or is the player going to go wide, because that will lead me to play a different way. So, I don't know.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Well, it looks like we're going to take a very small break and be right back with the second game of this match. Oh, actually, we're going straight to the second
It's
game.
the
I
shortest
apologize.
break.
Yes, it's no break at all.
Yeah, break.
Oh, there it is. That's all it was. Oh, there was the break right there. Looks like we're going straight into the second game here between these two competitors, and Brandon's going to be on the play again this game, and let's see if it pairs out just a little bit better for him than the last one, even though that was a pretty good start from him. So that's why sometimes it could feel like such a daunting matchup here between these two decks when you're on the Amber Shield side. You could feel like, I did everything right, and it just might not matter. Take a look at these openers and what he's going to get rid of and what he's going to keep.
We have an interesting... I'm trying to figure out which pile he's keeping and which he is
Yeah, as I say.
throwing. We do have the whole new world. I think, was that a Naveen underneath it? Nope. Go away, so it doesn't matter.
Oh, a Cinderella off the top is very welcome.
Yeah, I didn't see what Zelda was doing at all. I was too intently.
Yeah, I was going to say,
staring at the Steel Song player.
both players are pretty good at hiding some of it, so we got a little bit of a view into their altars here, but I did see a Cinderella off the top for Brandon. He was either comfortable in keeping or getting rid of a whole new world. It shows you how much they feel like this matchup could be dependent on that card. A little bit better when you know you're going first.
Yeah, I mean, so for Steel Song, there is a strategy, as I've indicated, where you hit a whole new world as early as possible. And with cards like Lantern, with Naveen, normally you can hit it on turn 4. If you shift in Robin Hood, you can hit it on turn 3. If you're playing Queen, which not many people are anymore, you can do it on turn 2. But with the Lantern, you can Naveen on turn 3 as well. And when you're on the play, that means that you're hitting that before your opponent has a chance to use their Fishbone Quill. So that is a line available to you. But if you don't have the Naveen to pair it with, or the Lantern, or the Robin Hood Shift package, generally you probably don't want to keep it and want to prefer instead to go wide early.
Yeah, absolutely. So it looks like Ursula's going to go down into a Robin Hood turn 1 for Braden here. Not as important to play Cinderella in this matchup because you're not going to be singing songs too often on turn 2. You have like maybe Bare Necessities, maybe a few other things, but like they're not as impactful. The other songs are not as impactful. This matchup is the ones where characters are getting played on turn 2 and turn 3 every time because you don't really want to kill a Tipo. You don't feel like you have to, destroy a Tipo with one of these. So definitely like somehow getting the Robin Hood in play, especially if I can't see all the cards to him. But if he has the shift line, which I think he does, I think it's a Robin Hood here. He may be able to do that line that you were talking about where he gets the Robin Hood, the Sherwood down really, really early and gets out quite ahead because of that.
Yeah, let's see if we end up taking that line. I mean, that is an indicator. There was a Cinderella available, and so Zelda, again, trying to read if that early whole new world is coming, that is, again, going to change how she plays, sees that Robin Hood instead of the Cinderella and thinks, well, that may have been the only one drop, but perhaps we are setting up for that shift.
Yeah, you see this Tipo on 2 into a Fishbone Quill on 3. This is... I'll say it looks like it's just going to go ahead and be a brawl, so like that's a head-up play from Zelda here. This is going to take away the Robin Hood shift line away from Braden. Really heads-up play from Zelda here, because the Tipo kind of already did the Fishbone Quill play, and so she's not as susceptible to Hold No World, and now Braden doesn't even have a chance to Hold No World this turn. So she'll be able to do something like Fishbone Quill next turn and do stuff like that if she thinks that's what's going to happen to her.
Yeah, absolutely. Brandon now drawing into a Piglet. Again, if the strategy here was to go wide, that is the card you want to draw into after the Smee. Here, Ariel Spectacular Singer on turn 3 is going to dig for a song. But yeah, no, that's a great point. There was, I think the common wisdom is that Fishbone Quill is always the right play to prepare for that whole new world start to dump ink into the inkwell and make sure you get that on board. But yeah, Zelda indicating I'd rather you not. I'd rather you not get rid of my hand. I kind of like what I'm seeing, getting rid of that shift target.
Yeah, I think it was a very heads-up play from Zelda and a great play as well. One that I might not have been able to make in the spot just because I'm like, oh, I've got Fishbone Quill on 3. Let me play this and get out ahead. And again, that's still good against a whole new world. But what if they just shift Robin Hood and start, questing and doing stuff like that? Now you're still behind.
Yeah. So one word you'll hear TCG players use a lot is the term inevitability. And I've used it a few times today, but I'll explain what I mean by that. And that is, in a game that goes long, there is one deck that is going to win. That if the game goes 20, 30, 40 turns, it is the deck that's going to come out on top usually every single time. In this matchup, the inevitability is with the Ruby Sapphire deck, especially without Sleepy's Flutes in Brendan's deck to kind of close things out. If he's not playing them, and I haven't seen one yet, so I'm assuming they're not in there. And so for Zelda, the longer this game goes on, and every turn that she can delay, the lore game, the more likely she is to win. Also, I'm not sure if you see that, Tannon. There's an Olaf walking around out there.
That is a giant Olaf, actually. One of my favorite characters in Disney.
Disney Lorcana Challenge is always a fun time. You never know what you're going to see.
You never know who you're going to see, what character from any Disney movie is going to show up. I hope that Olaf is half as funny as the Olaf in Frozen was, because I don't know if you know this, that's one of my favorite characters in all of Disney. That guy kills me. He's so funny.
He is a character.
Yeah, so see, how is Olaf doing in a desert? I don't think he would do very well. Hopefully he's staying indoors.
He does love summer.
It's nice in summer out here, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. All right. So let's see. I mean,
I like how you're like, all right, like we're done with the Olaf joking. Is that
Oh,
I'm not
no,
allowed
no,
to make
no.
any more Olaf jokes? Are you
You
the
can make all
arbiter? Are you the
No,
arbiter
no.
of Olaf jokes?
I'm not the arbiter of fun. You can make as many Olaf jokes as you'd like.
Sure.
Yeah. So here we have, that's that play you talked about earlier there. Yeah, so, Smee oftentimes taking 1 damage is a detriment, but when paired with Rapunzel, and that's the perfect way you want it to work, quest twice, get 2 damage on it, allows Brandon to refill his hand, and that is one of the lines he's really looking to hit in this deck. There's so much card draw in this Sapphire deck with Hiram and all of these other filter cards that Brandon needs to keep up somehow if he's not going to play a whole new world, and Rapunzel is one of the ways that you do that. And then it leaves you with a 2-lore quester with pretty high stat or pretty high willpower in order to drive your lore total. So
Yeah, this isn't a bad game plan for Brandon here. What he's doing is, he's just progressing his board a little bit here. He's not going super wide super early, but he is going wide here. He's going to keep the Smee around for multiple turns. The Smee's going to go for, questing multiple times a turn. He's got a Singer in play. He's got a Rapunzel, which quests for 2 here as well. So he's starting to really challenge Zelda on, you need to deal with my stuff from this point where I'm going to be getting a whole bunch of lore. The thing is, there is an ice block in play, so Sisu is a sweeper here, along with Be Prepared stuff. We're starting to get into those turns. So Brandon needs to start, figuring out, like, you have to dance a tightrope here of, like, how much do you want to extend? What do you want to play into? What do you want to play against the most? Like, you could try to play around Sisu, and then you play into Be Prepared, and vice versa. You have to figure out what's the best way to do that here, and he's got a lot of options, which I think he also has a Pete in his hand, which is something you can maybe see him go for here, going into, I was going to say, is that 4, 6? Yeah, we got 7 ink on Zelda's turn. There's a chance you're going to start seeing Pete's happen, because a lot of ways that this game is won by the Amber Steel player is they do this. They get out to a little bit of a lower lead, lore a ton, play a Pete, and then if the player has a weak turn the next turn, you just Pete them again. If you have 2 Petes, and then the game ends from that point. And there's maybe a chance that that starts to happen here, and it does look like Brandon is actually going that route.
yeah, and it's a great point. That's exactly what's happening. Doing the ink count over there and saying, I see you have 6, no, 7 now. So Be Prepared is an option. I'm going to shut that down. And then to boot, we have a Piglet come into play here, a card that's going to have 3 lore now because there's 2 other characters in play. But crucially, it's also preventing Smee from taking damage when questing, which allows him to stick around.
Yeah, and so there was a quest for 5 here this turn. Next turn, this is a quest for, I believe, 9, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, 9 is face up. So that's 14 quests over the next 2 turns.
I think 7.
Yeah, so
I got 7 total. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I forgot the Piglet. Yeah.
so we've got 9 here. We went from, so it'd be what? You kind of throwing me off now. 14. Okay,
I'm
so
sorry.
we go up to 17, and that's palatable here because if you go Pete here, if you didn't even have the second Pete, you could like, all right, fully quest here. You're only out as a sweet me. So what I'll do is I'll have enough in my hand that I could play the next turn that also threatens to be enough questing to go forward and be enough to win the game from there. And I got to believe he's going to be going for the Pete again here because it was good for 1 turn. It's definitely good for the second turn. And Britain's in a really, really good spot to take this game.
And it's a fun moment to talk about meta calls, too, because one of Zelda's outs here is drawing into that Sisu, which would sweep the majority of the board. I think we'd see that Pete still standing there. if the Sisu came down once we used the ice block. And the reason Sisu is so popular now is because of Pete. And so if Pete is used to shut down the action again, and it doesn't look like we'll see that. But if Pete were used here again to shut down the Be Prepared, Zelda top decking that Sisu is a perfect example of where we see meta shift.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see about the aerial play here. Like, yeah, it's going to add a song to hand, so it's kind of like, if it adds a song to hand, it's card neutral if it were to get swept up. I don't know exactly how much ink Brandon has in going into the next turn. The thing is, like, if you get swept up here now, your hand consists of a song, Tinkerbell, and I think a Naveen. So now you're at 17. If you were to get swept up here, you can't present one character that threatens to get to 20 the next turn. Don't know. If you had enough to go Naveen and Ariel the next turn, I think I would have rather seen not playing Ariel this turn.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But yeah, that is a line. I do want to mention we did see the Let the Storm Rage on coming down to deal 2 damage to Pete in order to allow Brendan to draw a card. And then Zelda not drawing into that Sisu. Dig a little here, but I don't know that there's an out of this.
Yeah, I think once we've seen 4 ink get committed, this might signal that this game is over from here. Madam not good enough, Brawl not good enough. I mean, Brawl, you take care of the Piglet, you're still inking up way too much. It does look like Brandon's going to even this match up.
Yeah, and another important note here is the difference between play and draw, particularly in this matchup. I do think the common wisdom is that Ruby Sapphire is favored in this matchup, and that's true, but it's really favored in a 3-game series where it has a chance to perhaps be on the play twice, because Steel Song is definitely favored both on the play and on the draw, but only, I think, slightly on the play. I'm sorry, the Ruby Amethyst deck is favored here, slightly on the play, slightly on the draw, slightly when... God, I think words have lost all meaning for you now. I think I'm going to